Please welcome Jennifer Gerhold, Senior Director, Environment Program for the Corporate Citizenship Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third National Circular Economy Summit and our 7th Annual Sustainability Conference. I'm Jennifer Gerhold, and I'm Senior Director for Sustainability and Circular Economy Programs here at the Corporate Citizenship Center, and I am just delighted to welcome you all. I'd also like to invite our event partners to join me on stage. We're going to thank you and give some introductory remarks. So again, thanks to everyone who is joining this conference, including those who are joining virtually. I also want to thank our wonderful partners for the event, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and also the World Economic Forum's platform for accelerating the circular economy. I'd also like to thank all of our event sponsors. So Arizona State University, who sponsored our lovely opening reception last night, along with Ecolab, Enerchem, Edison Energy, Keurig Green Mountain, Ingersoll Rand, Lockheed Martin, and TerraCycle for back-of-the-house support. And then I also recognize our companies who shape our circular economy and sustainability program. So Dow Chemical Company, DSM North America, FedEx, MGM Resorts, Republic Services, Sealed Air, Shell, Veolia North America, and the Walmart Foundation. And then finally, I'd like to thank all of our staff and volunteers. We've been working tirelessly on this event for the past 6 months, and hopefully you will have a wonderful experience with us. So please join me in just thanking our fantastic team. And so I'd like to take just a minute to outline how the Corporate Citizenship Center sees the circular economy in the United States and the value that we see in this event in helping to propel the agenda forward. So as many of you know, the circular economy is an innovation, performance-based model that focuses on designing out waste and inefficiency from the system and really provides a compelling framework for systems-level redesign and innovation and really putting sustainability at the heart of the business. And as we've heard from Accenture forecast, shifting to the circular economy could unlock $4.5 trillion in additional economic growth by shifting current waste into wealth. So it's a tremendous opportunity for business and the global economy. And so awareness of the circular economy has really been increasing in the United States among businesses, among cities and states and other stakeholders. And these stakeholders are trying to figure out what the opportunity is for them and how they can drive circular economy growth and achieve their sustainability goals. So key to being able to do that is integrating the circular economy throughout your core business and operations and your value chains, but how do you do that? We're hoping this event is going to help you answer that question. And so we've mixed things up this year where most of this conference is focused on small group discussion and breakouts because we want to provide as many opportunities for you as possible to learn from each other, share your experience, identify new ways of working together, identify possible new collaboration opportunities or deepen existing collaboration opportunities. So this event, in addition to the small breakouts, we've got interactive lunch discussions, we've got dinner discussions, so really providing a lot of opportunities for you to learn from each other and figure out how do you make the circular economy a reality and how do you bring that to scale. And so this event is part of our dedicated circular economy and sustainability program that provides a pre-competitive environment for companies to learn, share, network, and collaborate. And so in addition to this annual event, we do case study reports, research, business learning tours, pilot projects to really help you execute on winning strategies that optimizes resources, that eradicates waste, that helps to drive business performance and innovation. And so I'd like to just announce a couple of brand new initiatives that you'll find in your conference app over the course of this conference. One is I'm very excited to announce the launch of our newest circular economy case study report that features almost 20 examples of how the private sector is helping to implement circular principles. So you'll find a link to that in the app, I believe tomorrow. So look forward to your feedback on that. We've also launched a circular economy toolbox in partnership with the Sustainability Consortium and the Retail Industry Leaders Association. And that really helps companies to identify opportunities for integrating circularity throughout their business. So there'll be a dedicated session on that tomorrow. So hopefully you'll be able to attend that. And then additionally, I'm very pleased to announce that we are hosting our third Circular Economy Learning Tour in New York City in partnership with the New York Department of Sanitation. And that will be on October 11 through 12. So you'll find more information about that learning tour in your conference app. And so just to wrap up with some housekeeping announcements, please use the Twitter hashtag USCCFCircular, share your thoughts on social media. Additionally, please remember to download the event app because this event is paperless for the most part. So if you have any problems downloading the app, there are several colleagues at registration that can assist you with that. During the plenaries, please submit questions through the app because that is how we are going to be asking questions of our speakers. So please make sure that you utilize that if you have any questions during the plenary sessions. And then additionally, as I mentioned, we do have 3 different dinner discussions this evening. So if you would like to attend one, please sign up at registration, and then we will send you more information about the location and other particulars for that dinner. And then finally, please connect virtually using the app. Sign up, you then can connect with other attendees, set up meetings, email each other. So please use that function as well. So we're really excited to announce that. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, Andrea Brown, who is the Director of of Circular Economy at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, where she is focused on building consensus, implementing across complex organizations, and influencing teams to buy in to scale the circular economy, greenhouse gases, energy, and waste initiatives.
Jennifer. Well, I think my mic is on, yes. So happy to be here. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many people in the room. We, within the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we're a global business organization. We have around 200 member companies focused on advancing sustainability towards our vision of 9 billion people living well within the limits of the planet by 2050. And I think with regards to circular economy, this has been something that companies have sort of really latched onto, I think, over the last couple of years. We actually coined the term eco-efficiency more than 20 years ago, which we see as sort of a foundation to really now where we're headed with circular economy, which is obviously focused around a system that's regenerative by design. But I think with that foundation in mind, we have sort of a long history of working on these topics within the WBCSD. And I think where we see business headed is that circular economy is really an opportunity to bring the business community together in a way that focuses the discussion around reducing risk and improving opportunity. And so, certainly risk around resource scarcity, we see that the projections for resource use will cause an overuse of the Earth's capacity by more than 400% by 2050. So obviously, if you're in business and you're manufacturing things, that is an extremely large risk that needs to be taken into consideration. Of course, around resource price volatility, which we see really as the new normal in business, and of course, a way of addressing and reducing your risk around environmental impact, whether that's CO2 emissions, water use, waste, many of the environmental impacts, of course, that go along with circular economy. But also a way to really drive discussion around opportunity. So, companies are seeing that reduced operating costs are happening when they're moving towards circular economy. They're improving competitiveness. They're driving discussions around innovation. And they're also, of course, addressing GHG impacts. And of course, with projected CO2 pricing and these kinds of things, there's real opportunity there. So, how we work with business, and I think one of the things we've heard from the companies that we work with over the last couple of years is that there's a real need to kind of demystify what this circular economy is. And so we've been working with many of the partners, such as the foundation, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the World Economic Forum, and others, to really work with our member companies to sort of translate some of these the thought leadership and the work that's out there into sort of tangible business areas. So we released the CEO Guide to the Circular Economy a couple weeks ago at the World Circular Economy Forum in Helsinki. We have also just launched a practitioner's guide to the circular economy yesterday in conjunction with this event, which has over 70 tools and strategies targeted at businesses, depending on what function you have within a company, and sort of curates the tools and practices that are already out there into a business language and a business use. So we've been working quite significantly on that space over the last 18 months or so to really work at driving the circular economy into the language of business, working with our companies and their supply chains and doing that. And I think where we're headed next is really on helping business measure measure circular economy, measure their performance around circular economy, and translate that language into the audiences that they work with, whether that's their stakeholders or internal engagement or investors. But also working on policy. How do we engage and develop a business voice which helps drive policy in the right direction, which can help unlock some of the challenges that you're all facing in your businesses today. And can we also work on some sector deep dives? So how do we translate some of the big numbers down into sort of tangible understanding by certain sectors, whether that's construction or mobility or chemicals? We're exploring all of that right now. So I think we're so pleased to be here because I think this is exactly the kind of discussion that we see a need to have. So to really make, and I think the foundation and Jennifer has done such an excellent job in developing an agenda over the next day and a half, which really allows us to get into the details and to really talk through some practical examples and start to move the momentum forward around the business community. So I think with that, I want to introduce Rob Opsimer from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. He's the lead of the systemic initiative on the new plastics economy, really moving the agenda forward around the plastics discussion, focusing first on packaging. And I'll let Rob give your remarks. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks a lot for that, Andrea. And good morning again, and welcome again. It's really fantastic to be here and to be able to share the stage with Jennifer and Andrea. And it's really fantastic to see all of you here in the room gathered today. And I think that the attendance of this event today is really a reflection of the wider momentum we see on the circular economy globally. We have now at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation more than 300 formal relations with companies and other organizations that are all driving specific activities around the circular economy and importantly collaborations, and they're doing that today, and about 1/3 of these are based here in the US. We see companies stepping up, and just this year as two examples, Unilever and Apple stepped up and made real tangibles and very ambitious commitments towards the circular economy, and we see many more of these case examples happening. And it's of course also fantastic to see organizations like the USCCF, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the World Economic Forum, and many other organizations all getting firmly behind this concept of the circular economy. And we've really seen at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the 7 years since we brought the concept of the circular economy as an economic opportunity to the market, we've seen that momentum grow exponentially, and that makes us really, really hopeful for what the next couple of years will bring. And I think within that context, with that mass momentum we see today, the theme of this conference, moving from aspiration to implementation, could really not have been chosen better. And I have not been personally involved in the selection of the title, so I can actually say that. Because it does reflect what's going on in the market today. We see that companies, other organizations, they are seeing the vision, they are seeing the benefits, you are seeing the benefits, and companies and others are moving towards actually transforming that into action. So I think that's very well a reflection of what's happening out there, and an excellent theme for the event today. It also reflects what we have been doing at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation over the past couple of years, where we've shifted our focus very much from an emphasis on macroeconomic analysis, understanding the economic opportunity, which we're still doing, but shifting that much more towards concrete collaboration platforms with the C100, for example, here in the US and Brazil and Europe, and also importantly with the systemic initiatives, where we really deep dive on one material flow in the global economy and convene all the relevant actors to drastically accelerate the transition to the circular economy for that specific material flow. And we've been doing that over the past couple of years, I think with some degree of success with the new plastics economy, focusing on plastic packaging, bringing together more than 40 companies and other actors across the value chain, including some in the room here today, together, defining a clear vision, a circular plastic system, a new plastics economy, and now driving a set of collaborative activities towards that. And I think to close these opening remarks, I'd like to share some insights from an exercise we did in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, reflecting on, we're now 7 years in driving this topic forward. What have we learned over these past 7 years? And it turned out we have 5 insights from that. And the first one is that the linear economy is ripe for disruption. It's leaving trillions of dollars of untapped value on the table, as was already mentioned. It's extremely wasteful, and it's clearly overshooting our current planetary boundaries, so it's ripe for disruption. Second, a circular economy holds promise for new prosperity that is restorative and regenerative by design. So not just trying to reduce a little bit the negatives of today's system, but really move towards an economy where economic activity actually builds and rebuilds natural capital and system health rather than slowly depleting that. 3, a circular economy gives purpose to the digital transformation. We live today in an era of unprecedented digital transformation of pretty much every part of the global economy, and that the ability to give intelligence to materials, to products, the ability to have real-time feedback loops in the system creates a never-seen-before opportunity to implement circular economy at scale. 4, a circular economy offers opportunity for business, benefits society, and regenerates the natural environment. And 5, and perhaps most importantly of all, a circular economy presents an inspiring vision for an economy that works. And I think that last one, that importance of having a positive vision where we can, with different businesses, different organizations, governments, all get behind that positive vision in an era where there's so much disruption, so much challenges really all across the world, I think that's critically important. And so with that, welcome again, and over again to you, Jennifer.
Great, thanks Rob, and thanks Andrea. So we're really excited, so let's get started. So it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Tom Zaki, the CEO of TerraCycle. And TerraCycle is a global leader in the collection and repurposing of otherwise non-recyclable pre- and post-consumer waste. TerraCycle operates in 21 countries, working with the world's largest brands and companies to create national platforms to recycle products and packaging that currently go to landfill and incineration. So under Tom's leadership, TerraCycle is pioneering a new waste management process involving manufacturers, retailers, governments, consumers, to create circular solutions for materials such as cigarette butts, laboratory waste, coffee capsules, and food packaging that otherwise would have no path to be recycled. And we're very pleased to partner with TerraCycle on this event, so any traditionally non-recyclable materials will be recycled. So please join me in welcoming Tom Zaki.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here today. My goal is to chat with you a little bit about how we look at circular economy. And the key question here for me is, I think we all understand the practical aspects of this. How do we go from a linear system to a circular system? And what was mentioned this morning about the great value inherent in it, what we try to think about is how do we take practical steps very quickly and produce value fast so that organizations, whether it's retailers, whether it's consumer product companies, manufacturers, can move along those ways and not feel like it's too far down the horizon. So a little bit of a background. This is today where TerraCycle operates around the world. We're in 21 countries. One of the things we've noticed as we've expanded around the world is this platform works very well in developed markets. We're still struggling a little bit in how to launch in developing countries. And one of the reasons is waste is sometimes a luxury to deal with when there's other issues out there like roads or health or safety. Now, just for fun, tell you a little bit of context where we came from. 15 years ago, this was actually the very moment TerraCycle was founded, my friends and I growing certain plants in our basement. And now you know the pot smokers amongst your friends here. Anyway, all joking aside, what was really interesting to me was how my friends started making the plants work, which was basically taking organic waste and feeding it to worms, and then taking the resulting worm poop or worm castings and feeding it to the plants. And this started a really interesting brainstorm around why does the entire concept of garbage even exist? It's entirely a man-made idea. It's also economically interesting. It's the only material in the world that has negative raw material value. In other words, people are willing to pay to get rid of it. It's one of the definitions of what makes waste. So TerraCycle was formed 15 years ago as a company to try to eliminate the concept of waste. And we first came about doing that by basically becoming a company dedicated to organic waste. We invented machines that would convert it in large quantities to really premium worm poop, basically. And then this became the first thing we ever did, which is take used soda bottles directly. Still the only company in the world to directly refill in high-speed bottling used bottles, fill them in this case with this fertilizer, and then sell it to many of the retailers that are in this room. In fact, Walmart was the first purchase order TerraCycle ever received. Now, what's interesting about this has nothing to do with fertilizer. There's a lot of interesting learnings when you start looking at waste and putting it into different contexts. For example, in soda bottles, there is very little range. In fact, 99.5% of all the bottles in the US fall into 4 key categories: 20 ounce, half liter, 1 liter, and 2 liter. And within those shapes, everything is the same: the heights, the tread, the base. So you could actually take mixed bottles and run them through high-speed bottling lines. We also, though, learned back at the beginning that garbage actually has intellectual property rights. And so the lawyers at Coke and Pepsi mentioned that to us when they saw that these bottles were on the shelves of these major retailers. But I think when you embody the idea of purpose, and circular economy does that in a very big way, it really allows you to do things you couldn't do before. So for example, this product enjoys the world's first and still only license from Coke and Pepsi to package shit in their distinctive shape and sell it. Now, what we found as we grew as effectively a fertilizer business is that we weren't really solving the issue of waste. Because when you make the product your hero, and if anyone here is a consumer product company, the product is the hero in a consumer product company, so you're going to pick the very, very, very best raw materials. In our bottle, here we were picking uncrushed soda bottles instead of crushed ones. We were really carefully picking the organic waste to feed to the worms. Everything was focused to try to make the very best product. Now, even though it was technically made from waste, it wasn't dealing with many other waste streams like, say, dirty diapers or femcare waste or chewing gum. We would never get there. So we asked ourselves, what's the purpose? And if our purpose is to eliminate the idea of waste, well, we really need to understand why this idea exists and then how to solve it from that point of view. So the most important thing in garbage is that it doesn't exist in nature. It's an entirely man-made idea. And in researching this, for one of the books I wrote, we found that it's actually incredibly modern too. Really just around the 1950s, 2 things happened. Partly because, right after World War II, the economies globally were relatively depressed and there needed to be a movement to create business growth. 2 things came onto the market. First, consumption. A person alive in the 1950s purchased 10 times less stuff than someone alive today. So in 70 years, 10x increase in consumption, which is of course amazing for business, not so great for the environment, but really drives the economy. Just to give you a crazy stat, in clothing, for example, an average woman in the United States buys 67 garments a year and uses them on average 7 times before disposal. Now compare that to what the experience would have been like 100 years ago, when people may have bought 1 garment and mended it. I mean, who here has cobbled their shoes recently? instantly instead of going out and buying. Thank you, amazing, by the way. I'm so glad you say yes to that. Now, the other issue is that not only are we consuming at a ferocious pace, but what we're consuming now is made from complex materials, not materials that nature knows what to do with. I mean, look around the room. The carpet we're sitting on is, or standing on is synthetic. Our shoes, my shoes aren't synthetic. Most things are, 40% of the clothing in this audience is synthetic. So that's the compounding factor. Now, where does it go? 25% still ends up in our oceans. In fact, we'll talk about this a little bit later. We have recently launched the world's largest solution to ocean waste, and I'll talk about the business model in a moment. But here, for example, are photos from our team in Japan, and this is what the coasts of Japan look like, a highly developed country all along the Sea of Japan side. And it's all waste that's floating up every single day. It's not even a bottle here or a bottle there. It's literally saturated. Or from our team in Latin America, this is what the Kuna people's islands look like, which is an indigenous group who don't even buy consumer products, yet every single day their islands, the Sandblast Islands in Panama, end up getting flooded with consumer product waste. So it's a huge, massive issue. We're going to come back to that in a moment. 2% is what gets globally recycled, and the balance is burned or buried. Burying is the most common global answer. It's what here in America we do mostly, which is landfilling, and burning, which is a little bit, ideally with some energy recovery, though many incineration facilities don't recover any energy. That's more popular in places like Japan, South Korea, Europe, and again, ideally there's some energy recovery there. Now, so that's the issue, right? That's how waste comes to be. And the biggest creator of waste are linear products, products that are made, used, typically very quickly, and then disposed. And today, if you look at all consumer goods, the vast majority fall under a linear perspective. Again, look around this room and realize everything, no exception, will be waste. The chair you're sitting on, the clothing you're in, the carpet, your shoes, literally everything will be waste. How many of the things here in this room can you put in a recycling bin and have it recycled? So the very first thing we said is, instead of focusing on the product as the hero, let's figure out how to take linear systems and get them to be a little bit more bent, a little bit more circular. So the first step, and again, this is all about baby steps, because the key to organizations, and about half the companies in this room we're somehow partnered with around the world, and what I've noticed in working with large organizations is it's important to put a dream out there. But it's really important to, as you take the steps towards circularity, to do it in small steps that then can be celebrated with tangible ROI, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. Because if you think too far out, the organization may not be able to get there without showing ROI throughout. So the first question is, let's just collect it and make sure it's recycled into something. Not even the thing it originally was, but at least something else, to allow it to become recyclable. Now, what I want to highlight here, sorry, the slide's a little weirdly formatted, but basically the key question is, what makes something recyclable versus not recyclable? This is a critical backbone of the thinking, because many times people say it's technical. You know, aluminum cans are easy to recycle technically, and maybe a toothbrush is difficult to recycle technically. The answer is really, there is some technical work, there's some science and design involved, but it's nothing to do with the technical capacity of the waste. It has everything to do with economics. Aluminum, for example, is so valuable that after the cost of collecting it and processing it, recyclers who are in the business of making profit can still make money. And that's why things like uncoated paper, aluminum, clear PET, and other materials are recyclable today. But everything else is not recyclable, not because it can't be, but because it simply costs more to collect and process it than it's worth. And that's the issue. Now, it's a good thing, because if it was technical, there would be a much bigger barrier. So the key challenge is one of money. Basically, waste streams don't have value. Take the beverage industry, just as an interesting case study. Beverages, at the beginning, were packaged in glass, until way back when. Glass today is the most recycled object in the world, clear glass. From there, the next step was moving to, say, aluminum. Aluminum is very recyclable, but at a lesser percentage than glass is it practically recycled. Then the next step from aluminum was moving to PET. PET is recyclable, but now, again, about a third of the rate of aluminum. The next step after PET was cartons. Cartons are now finally technically recyclable. They just crossed over 60% access in the US, but they're recycled at a much lower rate than PET. And what's the next step after cartons? Pouches, juice pouches or wine pouches, you name it. Those are 0%. So every step towards lightweighting and removing weight and so on has made an object less recyclable because value has been removed. And recyclers are simply chasing value. The joke here, by the way, if you want to make your product 100% recyclable and recycled, make it from solid gold, and I guarantee not one will ever be thrown in the waste. Now, that's hyperbole, but take the point, right? It's about having something of value so recyclers want to go after it. So the way we think about these questions is to solve waste, to go from that first step to the second step, linear to recycled into something else somewhat circular, is three things have to happen. The waste has to be collected, it has to be processed, but most importantly, it has to generate value to the person who's going to pay, or the organization that's going to pay that economic difference. Now, I want to start actually with solution, because I want to prove to you, just, and have some fun as it's a morning, that everything can go through circular processes. Now, there are 5 ways to solve waste, or to deal with it, from the worst to the best. Landfilling is the worst because it creates very low value, in fact, no value. Above it is incinerate, ideally with energy recovery, because at least you don't have a landfill and you recover some energy. But please note in incineration, the most difficult waste streams tend to burn at negative caloric value, which means more energy in than energy out. And the things that are the most recyclable are the ones that actually produce positive energy equations. And so it's important to note that as you think about incineration as a solution. Either way, those two are linear. From a circular point of view, let's go to the very top. Although I want to highlight that the real answer to waste isn't this chart. The real answer to waste is consuming differently, moving from disposable to durable, from durable to used, and then ideally not purchasing anything at all. Now, the challenge I leave you with is, how do you monetize the concept of not purchasing? So within solutions, the best circular solution is reuse. Reuse is, this is an example of reuse, but it's also very popular in electronics, clothing, toys. With some of the retailers here, we've done programs in collecting and recycling clothing, toys, things like that. But I want to show you atypical reuse. Of course, refilling soda bottles is, but here's an example with Unilever, where we took 35 million used post-consumer margarine containers, and this is how plants at Walmart were sold all up and down the West Coast. So just to give you a sense of the business model here, the idea is we found that margarine tubs can fit the exact same spec as planting pots. There's just a hole put in the bottom, and you sticker over the UPC code, so you scan whatever this plant is versus margarine, and voila, it goes on shelf. All the vendors stay the same, but now it's creating a solution to waste and creating more waste, because the black planting pots are, of course, not recyclable today. Now, reuse is very limited. We today collect about 5 million kilos of hard-to-recycle waste a week, and about 1% can go into reuse. The next area is upcycling. Upcycling, now there's multiple definitions of upcycling. One definition, the cradle-to-cradle one, is upcycling is when the material leaves with greater value. Downcycling is when it leaves with lower value. We use the more, if you go to Google, what the popular definition of upcycling is, where you value every aspect of the waste but its purpose. And I just want to show you, just with imagination, everything can go into different solutions in mass scale. Everything you're seeing here are products sold at major retailers. Whether it's, that past one was US post office bags into mail bags, all the way to confectionery wrappers and shower curtains, you name it. There's no limit. The challenge with upcycling is, while it's very creative and tremendously fun, not everyone wants to walk around with a shoe that looks like this. So it's, again, highly limited. Even though we're the biggest out there, it's still a relatively small segment, because not everyone wants this sort of stuff. Not everyone wants highly branded goods. Just as a quick backdrop, the way we do this is we work with major manufacturers. This is, for example, Timberland, who makes, in this case, a shoe where the base is wine corks and the sides, the leather parts have been replaced with flexible packaging, in this case, a coffee bag. Upcycling can be really fun as well. Here's, for example, different dresses that are now in museums. One made from candy wrappers, another made from condoms. You're always ready to party when you wear that dress. Now, just for fun, even our offices around the world, we adopt this philosophy. By the way, cheapest way to do interior design is designing with waste, whether it's our offices here in Budapest or Toronto, Brazil, London, even in Trenton, New Jersey, where we're headquartered. Every detail made from waste. It's a wonderful way and a very cheap way to create interior design. But upcycling is still 1% of the solution. So what happens with 98%? 98% goes into recycling. Recycling is where you value the materials that something is made from, and not its shape, not its form and not its function. So everything can be recycled. It's just a question of money. For example, we recycle large quantities of used cigarette waste, cigarette butts, in 11 countries around the world, including here in the US. And it's a simple process. You shred them, separate the organics, the ash tobacco paper, compost it, and take the filter, which is made from cellulose acetate, and make it into these sort of products. So everything, whether it's cosmetic waste into gardens, whether it's flip-flops into playgrounds, everything can go into chip bags, into shipping trucks. So even dirty diapers, we're now launching national dirty diaper recycling in Holland. Now, the key thing I want to focus on, hopefully now you see it's solvable, is what makes the engine go around. So one example partner we have are consumer product companies that can't take responsibility. Many consumer product companies want to take responsibility. So they fund platforms where consumers can send in waste at no cost. And it's a really wonderful program, has 100 million people today engaged in it, but I want to focus less on the mechanics, but more the why. What makes it work? Once a company creates a national recycling program for their waste, whether through us or on their own, you can then claim recyclable on the package, and that creates a market share shift. The sales go up, whether it's chip bags in Israel, whether it's Capri Sun here in the US, sales increase. Another really, even cigarettes in Canada, for example, everything can be recyclable. The other key thing is how do you leverage this then at retailers? So for example, consumer product companies get major return by getting purposeful shopper marketing programs into retailers, whether it's 10,000 grocery stores in the US where consumers can build a playground from, in this case, used oral care waste, all the way to in-store collection. Here's an example with Unilever, and I want to really highlight the motivation. The concept here is you can take aerosol containers into this kiosk that we manage at DM, which is the largest pharmacy in Germany, and for every 400 aerosols, we make a bike and give it to a kid in need. That's really wonderful, very purposeful, recycles things that couldn't be recycled before, generates a meaningful gift to people. €1 million of bikes were given away in this program. But what made the engine go around? That Unilever was able to gain this display. And that's critical. You can't just go in and say, let's do circular economy because it's the right thing to do. It's all about what makes the engine work. So that's consumer product companies. Retailers. Well, retailers' primary motivator is selling stuff, and the most important thing that's needed, especially in a world of e-commerce degradation, is foot traffic, people walking in. And we've seen that by putting in-store recycling programs into retailers, people end up going to that store more than before, especially move from online to back into a retail environment. Whether it's simple systems or very complex systems, it can work in many different ways. Cities, for example, one of their primary motivators is reduce litter to increase tourism. So for example, in 50 major cities around the world, from Melbourne, Sydney, Paris, Tokyo, Los Angeles, there's now citywide cigarette recycling. And actually, next month we're launching in Mexico, Mexico City and Monterrey, citywide chewing gum recycling. Same thing, to reduce litter and to create tourism. Even small businesses. But just in the last few minutes I have, I'm going to skip this for a moment and show you the next step. So we talked about taking a linear platform and somehow collecting it and turning it into something else. And again, there is the need of someone to fund it, and hopefully you've seen the ideas of how you unlock the motivation to do that and want to fund these programs. But this is not the end. The next step is, what about taking the waste and putting it back into a product, creating something much more circular? Now, the biggest challenge in integrating recycled materials into products to accomplish this is price and performance. Because consumer product companies, especially the procurement teams at consumer product companies, tend to say, we love recycled polymer as long as it's cheaper and better than the virgin option, especially in a world of cheap oil, and the fact that recycling doesn't really create an equally quality polymer typically as virgin. It's very hard to accomplish that except in select industries. So I want to show you this case study. We worked with P&G. We actually launched this at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, this past January. And P&G wanted to create a large solution to ocean waste. They weren't the first to do it. Many others had done different things there, but they wanted to be the biggest. So with them, we contacted thousands of NGOs and industrial collectors that clean up beaches, rivers, canals, oceans, and lakes, any sort of marine environment, and collected all this waste. To show you sort of the diagram, basically the waste would go from these collections now in every continent around the world. This is running in major scale, to our local warehouses where we'd sort out things like seaweed, fishing nets, things that were not that material. From there, our team of scientists worked with, in this case, Proctor's team, as well as our partners in this case at Suez, which is a large waste management company, to create a high-performance material that could go into the Head & Shoulders bottle, which is the #1 shampoo bottle, or #1 shampoo brand in the world, at 25%. Now, that's the technical piece, and it's great, and it's working, it's scaling. You're going to see it even in other divisions at P&G very soon, but that's not the part I want to highlight. I want to highlight what makes the engine go around. So this is the bottle. If anyone here uses Head & Shoulders, you'd probably know that the bottle is typically white, and that's their iconic color. Now, why would a company, the #1 shampoo in the world, change their color to be gray? And it's not because they wanted to. The plastic in this case is so mixed up and has so many colors in it because of the way it's been floating in the oceans or other aquatic bodies that it had to be gray. There was no choice. It was mandatory if you wanted to use ocean plastic. But not only did it degrade the color, and call it a fundamental downgrade of color if you compare it to white, it was also much more expensive. So this is inverting that procurement issue. It's a more expensive polymer at a lower quality. And today, this is now the world's biggest solution to ocean plastic. It's rolled out into 30 countries across multiple divisions. So the key question, so what I want to leave you with, is why? What this had done is three things. The idea of telling, in this case, a story around something so meaningful and letting consumers take part created a earned media bonanza for P&G. It's already, since January, at over 5 billion earned impressions, which is a massive PR result, which means they don't have to invest as much in paid marketing, so that those dollars can help fund the material. Second, it allowed a product to go where no products go before. It was launched at the World Economic Forum, where products don't get launched. It just won an award from the UN that products have never won before. And you're going to see it do many things that products have never done, which is super cool. But much, much more important, retailers are really excited about it, and it's now sold out for the next 2 years across 30 countries. And why is that the case? Because consumers are craving purpose. Especially, today when I look at my news feed, everything is relatively negative. People want to feel good. They want to feel like they can do something. And it's an easy way for someone to feel like they can help solve a major issue than necessarily going to volunteer to clean up, which many people don't do. And this is the key, to be able to move these things forward. It's all about framing them in short-term ROI. By demonstrating that it has great retail demand, it can now go across and create truly the world's biggest solution to ocean waste by multiples. And so as you think about the circular economy today, and as you have your breakouts and discussions, what I really encourage you is to put a goal out there into the future. But think about what are the actions you can take that will create easy to quantify ROI in the next quarter, next 2 quarters, and not doing it because it's the right thing to do, or not doing it because it's the, we want to save the environment, but what's going to fulfill the primary motivator of your organization or your partners. And with that said, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Please welcome John Bradburn, Global Manager of Waste Reduction, General Motors.
How's everybody doing today? Excellent. I got a story to tell you. I guess I got quite a few stories. So my daughter-in-law sent me a text a couple days ago. It said, John, we're going to baptize the baby today at 6 o'clock in Michigan. So I am on a plane at 12:45. If you see me run off the stage really quick or something, maybe I got a little anxiety, but we got a baby baptism. It's my first, my one and only grandson. So looking forward to that. And I think we can handle this, get this done. And I brought my bag. Everybody that knows me knows I have stuff. I deal with stuff for GM. In fact, that's what I do for a living for GM. I'm a tree hugger, but I'm a modern tree hugger. I own a couple chainsaws, and I use them. And this is an emerald ash borer inflicted elm tree, or that got ash actually got after my farm there. I lost 2,000 or 3,000 trees that year. So let's go through this and talk about how circular economy can impact ecosystems. At GM, I manage GM's waste globally. I try to identify issues and solve them with materials. And as most of you would know, there are ecosystems throughout the world, and they vary depending on many, many factors. So let's go through a few examples, okay? But start with landfill-free, zero waste. That's a good foundation. We went after that 25 years ago. We've got 152 operations around the world that are zero waste, landfill free. It means the same to us. There's a very tight program. I manage it. There's one way to get on that list. That's through me. And that takes into account all daily manufacturing operations, and non-manufacturing came on board and they said, we want to be part of this. So they are part of it now, and we've got them part of the mix. It's a strong program, and in fact, there is no other automaker close to us at this point. So it's all about dollars too. 2008, I did a calculation, and I couldn't believe it. I put together all the different revenue streams around the world for recycling and reuse, and it came out to be $1.147 billion from our recycling and reuse. There's basically about 2.5 million metric tons a year generated that we recycle and reuse. And if you put that all, for instance, what might that mean from a visual perspective? If you put that material in the back end of Chevy Silverado pickups and you parked them end for end, the line created from everything we recycle and reuse every year would wrap around the world. That's how much stuff we deal with. But the true goal, really, with the materials and materials efficiency is to generate zero revenue. And that's because you're efficient. You're consuming your materials within your processes. And that's really our goal. But when we do generate the materials, and no system's perfect, we try to make some money. Very important. But we also try to address issues, and I'm going to get into a few of those. Okay, so here's an example. Rochester, New York, the plant manager wanted to be zero waste, and he said, don't mess with my processes. So from a design perspective, it became very difficult, right? What you're seeing here is a machining discharge material. It's got oil, obviously, machining oil. It's got moisture, water. It's got filter pre-coat material. It's got some gloves, some absorbents. And I thought, okay, we're going to have to get some people on a call. We put together a call in about 45 minutes, and then we said, what do we do here? Well, this phase separates. So we centrifuged it, and we did much beyond that, and this is what we designed from a tailpipe perspective. So this is how that Rochester, New York operation, a 100-year-old facility, by the way, which is very difficult in itself, has issues as compared to a greenfield. And this is what we did with that material. We went to some energy applications, we recycled some metals, we fed the oil back into the very system that generated it after we had to filter it a couple times. But that in itself paid for the zero waste program at that plant. Okay, here's one that I think is significant from a corporate perspective. GM had nothing to do with this spill in the Gulf. How many of you remember the crude gushing up from the bottom of the Gulf? I bet everybody here. And you probably thought about ideas or ways that this might be stopped or addressed. Well, we did too, and we have a little experience in oil and oil management, so I put together a really small team. Sometimes small teams get a lot of things done, and we went in there and set up a program, centrifuged 227 miles of the Gulf spill oil, and created some vehicle parts for the Chevy Volt. The 2010, 11, and 12 have a air management baffle. This is a part of it, about that long, goes over the radiator, and they have a 25% content of the used oil bloom, along with 25% content of post-consumer bottles, 25% tires, test tires from Milford, Michigan Proving Grounds, and it's 100% recycled content. Let's pass it around. So, check it out. It's got some good flex to it, and that's coming in from the tires. It's made by a company in Indiana. There's several steps, but we knew all those steps and followed it and tracked it right through. So this is a thermoset material, cross-linked, and it is the most challenging part for our high-voltage Chevrolet Volt battery. So you match physical properties sometimes when you want to reuse and repurpose it. And you also draw upon your experiences. So what I did when I went into the plant, they wanted to be zero waste, at launch in 2010, just south of Detroit, with the Chevy Volt. I went in and I looked at that and I thought, okay, I know what I can do with that. So I took a few home, went out to the barn, I cut them, the two sections there that you can see, the top of the T and the midsection, and I put that midsection up. And I had a result that I'm going to show you here in a minute. But just before that, I'm going to show you what typically is being done. And then I'm going to show you what innovatively can be done. So there's really two options and two angles, and they're both very important. This is the first one, and this is what you'll hear about mostly. And this is redeploying high voltage batteries and some of these systems like we're doing in Milford. And this is just one location where these are used as backup energy storage. Very common. A lot of engineering goes into that. These are ethylene glycol cooled batteries, so there is a challenge there. But what if you, going back to what I said, draw upon your experiences and did this? It's a wood duck. nesting, proud of her clutch down in that box, and that was in my backyard. So thought, must work. So we got 500 of these out in North America, and many other bird species are using them. This is repurposed. It's a cross-linked thermoset material. You could take that battery cover and you can heat it and heat it and heat it and heat it. It won't melt. You can't turn it into a resin unless you chemically break it down. Quite a bit of challenge there. It's also got fiberglass fill, and in this case, it'll help keep predators out from chewing holes into it. But reached out to the World Wildlife Fund, talked to those guys, and said, what sort of special species have you got that could use some nest boxes? And this happened. You're looking at one of the rarest birds on the earth. That's a scaly-sided merganser. There's only 2,400 left on the earth, estimated, and that's in China. And she had her babies, and I'm told that's the first time in China's history an artificial nest box was used on waterfowl. Okay, here's a filtration management for the environment. I wrote a spec on the left for the world filtration media that had become polypropylene and low cellulosic fillers. We now recycle that into various products. We also send some to energy. Before it was being landfilled. On the right, cartridge filters. Wrote a specification on that. Again, a design for the environment concept. Now we reuse many of these. That came out to be about $1 million savings annually per year. Here's a materials marketplace. So not all companies have, old people like me that can kind of make connections and have networks out there around the country and the world, really. Materials marketplace is an up-and-coming thing. Bob Zach's back in the corner. He can answer some questions on that. But the bottom line is the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development projects, and it matches up outbound products and inbound products. Do Your Part's another one. This project won the Society of Plastic Engineers Environmental Award this year, and then it went out from the automotive division. Then it won the SPE national contest competition. And what this is about, OEMs typically only set out and deal with a tier one. In this case, we set up the whole program, and we built a supply chain. And the common alternative for a lot of our plastics in this country is to go overseas. Not all of them, but in many cases, they end up gone, and we lose all these steps I'm showing you. We reintroduced all these companies, and we created a part for the Chevy Equinox. GMC Terrain is a manifold insulator, and it looks very similar to this. Let's pass this one around. This is a polyester fiber made from PET water bottles. It's about everybody doing their part. This is a supply chain, but we weren't done with that. We said, well, let's build a supply web. The web then included that Rochester, New York installation, and that now is going into homes, a few homes in special locations in Detroit and Flint, by the way. And by the way, 5 million water bottles collected for this. A lot of them are from Flint. I was born and raised in Flint. And it was very important they become part of that. The city generates a lot of material, as you can imagine. Now we're creating what I call a supply web. The web is one that takes materials like them water bottles and makes filters in Flint as part of a jobs and development training program at the epicenter of the lead crisis area. So it just continues, and it's growing from there. Our plant in Canada is involved, and CAMI, and they're sending water bottles out to a company, and then they're bringing back product as well. This is the way things typically work. They're not so linear. They're very complex. And this is what grows economy and develops jobs. Okay?
Please welcome Rick Wagner, Sustainability Manager, Chevron Phillips Chemical Company.
So I really appreciate being invited here to participate in this conversation about the circular economy. As a representative of a company who makes commodity chemicals and commodity plastics, one of the key things that we bring to the table is the beginning of the cycle. We bring innovative materials that help all of our customers find new ways to lower their use of materials, lower their greenhouse gases, and find innovative ways to bring things around. So one of the key things I wanted to bring about is let's talk about some of the history of plastics. Phillips in general started the production of high-density polyethylene in the 1950s. And I would say this is one of the first instances of something going viral. You think, 1950s, what went viral in the 1950s? Does anyone know about hula hoops? That was from high-density polyethylene looking for a new product. And it went across the nation. And the next thing that was really big was Frisbees. And you think, wow, lots of good fun. But there's been other great things, and I want to thank John, who talked about use of materials in automobiles. If you think about it, plastics are what enables the future of the driverless electric car. Because without lightweighting of those autos, you can't have that driverless electrical car. I mean, it's just not going to happen. The other thing is, think about all the great energy that's happening with the Internet of Things. These parts and interesting ideas that are being designed on the fly and developed and being printed out with complex structures. What is it being printed in? Plastics. So plastics has been a key enabler towards many innovations for the last 60 years. And I can see it continuing on. But one of the things that is really important is to understand, well, what does a product company like Chevron Phillips Chemical can do? Well, we can lower our footprint in bringing those plastics together in more efficient ways. The other thing is that we can work with our customers to learn new ways to design for recyclability and more innovation. Now, one key example, if you look at a coffee can, and this coffee cans, you know, a lot of coffee is used here in the United States. Back in the turn of the century, went to plastic jars. Now that reduction right there to high-density plastic jars reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. That's pretty tremendous. And both of them are highly recyclable. So, you know, that's a key point there, highly recyclable. Now, we also had Tom talking about reuse of materials, and, you know, the key thing here is plastics do create materials that can be reused. And it's very important to figure when you're designing products to see, well, not only can it be recycled, but what are some interesting ways that we can design reuse into it? But then, what about the other things? What about things that, gee, might be a little bit more complex in structure, like those Internet of Things devices? What about flexible packages? Now you think, oh, flexible packages, they are a challenge to recycling. Well, why do they exist? Well, there's a good reason. The good reason for that, we'll go back to the coffee example. If you go from that steel can to the plastic jar, that's a 50% reduction. But going to the plastic jar one more time, that's an additional 75% reduction in greenhouse gases. That's tremendous. That's a tremendous, you look at the, you know, you think about your circular economy, what's the first thing that you want to do? You want to reduce use of materials and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. The main reason why you're reducing the greenhouse gas emissions so much is because there's a 4-to-1 difference of weight of the material between the plastic and the steel can. But there's a challenge. And what do we do about that? So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, what about the next? What if you can't reuse it? What if you can't recycle it easily? There are technologies that are out there that bring the circular economy and its principles in line with that. And that's called, one of them is called pyrolysis. And that type of pyrolysis system takes plastics that are difficult to recycle and it unzips the molecules or depolymerizes them into chemical pieces. So either it can go back into the chemical monomers that made the plastics in the first place. So again, true circular economy. Or it can go into other products like waxes and other chemicals. And also it can, if the market's not right or if the materials aren't right, it could also go into fuels like ultra low sulfur diesel. And to give you an idea, you say, well, doesn't that burn? And I'll say, well, yes, but you're basically displacing what would have gone into regular diesel. And that's if you compare the greenhouse gas difference between the two, it's a 14% reduction in emissions between ultra low sulfur diesel and diesel from pyrolysis. Now there's other things as well. Things like gasification, which also makes chemicals and makes energy. What I'm trying to talk about here is that we're talking about a circular economy. So what's important is to keep in mind, yes, let's upcycle. Yes, let's reduce. Yes, let's recycle. But let's not forget, when you've come into some things that have brought benefits to society or that have brought great reductions in material use, and you can't figure out that design, or you've brought a new material to the marketplace that is really beneficial, but there's not enough material out there to go ahead and get it recycled economically. There are other solutions that keep these things away from the landfill. Keep in mind, one of the big issues out there in landfills is that things that get into landfills leak into the environment. And there's also plenty of countries out there that don't have waste management systems, which is part of what creates marine debris. So when you want to think about creating a system that manages the whole life cycle of things, you want to make sure that you have every piece of that, turning everything around that circle. So I look forward to your questions during our panel, and thank you for hearing me.
Please welcome Hugh Welsh, President and General Counsel, DSM North America.
Thought you were bumping me. So Tom, you're welcome. I think last year I broke new ground on this stage where I came here with a giant pile of elephant dung and made it socially acceptable to talk about poop here in the Hallowed Hall of Flags. But while that was a very interesting story, it did make me a lot of friends. To this day, most of you still won't shake my hand. So I figured this time, let me look on the technical side of the circular economy and see if I can come up with a DSM innovation, a DSM story that will help demonstrate how we as a company have moved from aspiration to implementation. When we talk about the technical side of the circular economy, I'm hearing already this morning the Internet of Things, digital, AI, robotics, the cloud. Everybody's looking to the heavens for answers. But today I want to take you on a journey where you go low. You look below your feet. Because right now, I'm standing in the future. All of you are firmly seated in the past. So before I begin my story, I have to lay a little groundwork. What's the #1 thing that goes into landfills in the United States? Let me hear you. No, that's absolutely wrong. It's actually disposable diapers. But I don't have an answer for that yet. So the #2 thing that goes into landfills in the United States is carpet. 4 billion pounds a year. 94% of carpet gets landfilled or incinerated. 6% gets recycled, but only 1% of that gets recycled into new carpet. So for me, this was an area ripe for disruptive innovation. But before I can tell you how, I have to tell you a little story about conventional carpet. Conventional carpet is a very, very complex product. It has many, many different ingredients in it. It's got polyester, it's got PA6, it's got PVC, latex, calcium chloride. And the way they make the carpet is they create fibers, they tuff those fibers, they put them in a binder, they pull it this way, they pull it that way, they throw a bunch of adhesives and latex underneath to try to stabilize it, and then they ship it to you. And when they ship it to you, it's an inherently unstable product. All of that energy is still stored, which is why when the guy shows up at your house, he's got to lay tack boards, he's got to have knee kickers, I just wanted to say knee kicker. He's got knee kickers, he's got power stretchers, and he lays your carpet, and when it's done, they pick it up, they throw it in a landfill. You probably notice when you have new carpet in your house or buy a new car, there's a smell. It might be a pleasant smell, but it's an unhealthy smell because carpet gives off VOCs, carpet gives off other chemicals. It's not a particularly healthy thing. But the most remarkable thing about conventional carpet is that it's made the exact same way since Ike and Mimi were in that big white house over there across Lafayette Park. You have no idea who Ike and Mimi are, do you? President Eisenhower. So for more than 65 years, carpet has not been disrupted at all. So we in DSM took a look at that and said, can we look at a way not to repurpose conventional carpet, but can we design the manufacture of carpet in a different way that at the end of its useful life, it can have a life again? And we call that Niaga. And we're not terribly good marketers. Niaga is actually, again, spelled backwards, but it seems to work. So Niaga carpet, and I have a piece right here, is made of one material, polyester. No smell. It smells exactly like a water bottle because it's made out of the exact same thing. It's a 2-layer carpet. It's just as good quality as conventional carpet. It's actually a little softer. You can come up here later and feel it. But the beauty of this carpet is it's 100% recyclable. 100%. And so, although we use 95% less energy in making it, we use no water in making it at all, this can be taken, shredded, melted into pellets, which we call black pearls, and then re-extruded to make brand new carpet all over again. That, to us, is revolutionary. It's not the Internet of Things. It's not the cloud. But imagine the world that opens up. So we just didn't make a better product, right? That's not really where design comes in the circular economy. We've created the opportunity for entire new systems. Why can't somebody get online and order a carpet? Pick their own design. We have it shipped to them. They don't like it, ship it back. We can melt it down, make a new carpet. If I can buy a custom shirt online or a big bulky mattress, why can't people buy carpet online and have it delivered to their house? When you're done with it, print out a label, ship it back to us. We'll give you 25% off the next carpet because it's feedstock for the new carpet. Why buy carpet at all? Why can't people just lease soft floor coating? Entire new business models open up as a consequence of this. It's not just creating a more valuable product where waste has been engineered out. It's making that product have its maximum value. And so I don't want to take a lot of your time this morning. I know we have a very busy day. But what I want to ask you to do is sort of have the corporate and creative courage over the next 2 days to think about how you can redesign the world around you. If carpet can be exciting in the circular economy, I'm willing to bet there's a whole host of other things. So I'm Hugh Welsh. I have the privilege of working for a company called DSM. We've been around for 115 years, started as a coal mining company, Dutch State Mines. We've repurposed that acronym to mean do something meaningful, and I and my 25,000 colleagues work to do that every day. Thanks.
All right, hello again, everyone. I'll move one step closer to the fellow panelists. I was asked to start by reminding you to please do use the app to submit questions to the panelists. So we'll have a couple of questions now, but then we'll turn over to the questions that have been submitted by the app. So please do submit them. And I'd like to start actually by saying that I thought all the 3 talks were really fascinating. I think it's a real pity John had to sneak out for his baptism, of course, a very good reason. Heard some very interesting stories there about how John has been working to reutilize materials in the production of cars. Some other angles I would like to have explored with him if he was here was how can we take these principles of recycling the materials and actually go to what we call the higher value loops in the circular economy and think about how can we design to remanufacture a car, for example, so that you can take entire parts out of the engine and use them again. How can we even design for car sharing? I have seen some very interesting concepts recently that actually look at how can you design a car so it's more easy to share. So for example, people have more, it's more easy to have different private spaces within one car. But so no John today, so over to the other two distinguished panelists, perhaps starting with you, Hugh. So fantastic to hear about the carpets, and I found it really interesting that you mentioned some of the different elements that are needed in this story. So you talked about designing and actually designing, which is of course the start of everything in the circular economy, designing the materials and the products so that they can be reused or recycled. You also talked about some of the other elements. How do we actually design systems to get them back? How do we design our business models? Do we perhaps have a leasing models? And if we do sell them on the open market, how do we design the mechanisms to get them back? So can you elaborate a bit on how these different elements of the puzzle interact and are all necessary to reach what we want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it started with the mindset of, let's not think about what to do with something at the end of its useful life. Let's go back to how the product is created and reimagine how to manufacture it, understanding that we needed to get to the same quality and price point. And if we can do that with something as mundane as carpet, we're working on a whole host of everyday other common items where we'll find new ways to make them so that they're decomplexed at the outset, makes them much easier to reuse or repurpose or recycle at the end of their life. Then that opens the door to a lot of creativity, not only in how you bring these products back. Now, the example of the carpet, you can bring that to a PET water bottle recycling plant and they can handle that product like that right there. But you can imagine we might, in a commercial application, be able to set up a plant and a recycling center in a place like Las Vegas, for example, where they, more likely than not, I suspect, use many, many miles of carpet every year. This is a way they can just constantly make their own carpet with their own designs on a recurring basis. We could set up recycling centers in communities where we can buy carpet back from folks when they don't want to use it anymore. So it just opens the door to a whole host of other possibilities that didn't exist when we were dealing with a product that was extremely complex in its construction, and as a consequence had no opportunity to recycle, reuse down the road.
And at this point in time, what do you think are the critical barriers that you still need to overcome? We heard some of the staggering numbers of the situation today to drastically improve the reutilization of carpets going forward.
It's getting to scale. So we've partnered with, at this point, with Mohawk, which is the second biggest carpet manufacturer in the world, and they're rolling out a residential carpet called Air.0, and that's the way this Niagara carpet will initially make its way into the market. But we're thinking through a number of other different ways that we can push this through, both on a residential side as well as on a commercial side, and get to scale quickly. It's remarkably low cost to build a plant that has the capacity to manufacture these things because they use one material, which makes logistics supply chain pretty straightforward, and it's not a complex manufacturing operation.
To which extent do you believe the leasing part of the equation is critical to get this to scale?
I just think the leasing part of the equation opens up a whole new way of monetizing this asset. So, I talked about leasing a soft flooring, but imagine, if you had the ability to change out the car mats in your vehicle every time you got a car wash or an oil change. That's cost prohibitive today. But in the future, why wouldn't a car wash or an oil changing place just say, hey, well, I can just get these recycled for new mats. It's very inexpensive. That's another service. And all it requires, I think, is a little imagination to find new ways to monetize this asset. And the one about potentially selling it through the internet and having folks be able to create a digital design for their own carpet. And I thought about it on the train on the way down. It just came to me. Hopefully I'll have some inspiration on the way back, or the DSM team will, but they're much smarter than I am. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks for that, Hugh. Rick, over to you, and we heard in your talk a lot about the many benefits that plastics can bring versus other materials in terms of being lightweight, reducing carbon footprints, etc. If we think about the the circularity of the material flow itself, aside from its enabling benefits it brings, what are some of the things you can do there by design to help improve that circularity of that plastics material flow?
So the key challenge with plastics really is in recycling. It is a highly recyclable material, and even things that are 100% of one material, whether it's polypropylene, PET, high-density polyethylene, or low-density polyethylene, aren't being recycled. The question is, why not? Oftentimes, it's just people are not clearly understanding what can be recycled and what infrastructure is there. I'll give you an example. We use bread. It comes with bread bags. They're highly recyclable. Now, most consumers can't put it in their recycle bin at their curbside, but 96% of North American folks can have access to recycling of plastic bags and plastic films. Where can you do it? Grocery stores. Other stores that have their film recycling in the front of the store, you can take those garment bags that are made of clear plastic or your bread bags, and you can go and you can recycle it there. Most people don't know that. How many people in this room know that? Yeah, looks about 30%. And that's a problem. This is highly recyclable materials. And the other thing is that, recycling guides across the U.S. are not always the same, depending upon where you live. You could even be across the street from someone, and you have a different hauler, and you may be able to recycle glass on one side of the street and not recycle glass on the other side of the street. Very confusing. So those are challenges out there that plastics have. Now, what can we do about it? Not only the communication and clarity, but also thinking about how do you bring better design principles to make things more recyclable. So, key thing is look at how complex your package is, and can you make it more simple? Can you make it something that is either recyclable in the bin or have some marking on the package that says you can take this package and recycle it at a store drop-off? So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the How to Recycle label. That's HOW, the number 2, recycle.org. If you use that label on your products, you're able to communicate how things are recyclable and make that communication out to the consumers.
And I think that's an interesting bit that comes from both your responses that need to simplify, decomplexify, as you put it, starting by design and the materials. So definitely the case with plastics as well. Thousands of different materials being combined in different ways, often for good reasons in terms of functionality, but where can we simplify that? Then also looking at the collection, the labeling, the sorting, how can we simplify that so that we don't expect people to become, PhDs in this topic. I've been working on plastics for the past couple of years, and even I often don't know what to throw exactly in which bin. So it's too complex for people. So how can we simplify that? Rick, perhaps the last question for you before we open it up to the question from the audience. One of the things that's clear with plastics specifically, and also with carpets, that it's impossible for any individual actor or company to fully capture the circular economy opportunity by themselves. So what are the types of collaborations you think would be needed to capture the opportunity?
So, what I can speak to is what Chevron Phillips does with a number of industry associations. So the American Chemistry Council's Flexible Film Recycling Group which is a group of across the value chain that's looking to double film recycling by 2020. Or the Plastic Industry Association's Finding Nemo for plastic film. And Finding Nemo, what is that? That's finding new end market opportunities for recycled plastic film. Because if you have recyclable material that's out there in the marketplace, but you don't have a place to use it, that's a challenge to the marketplace. Other things are like the Trash Free Seas Alliance, which is looking at marine litter. And what their goal is to reduce the leakage of plastics litter into the ocean by 50% by 2025. So the key thing is work with other industry groups, NGOs, finding the place that you think that your company and your products speak to, and you can make a difference together.
Excellent. Moving to the questions from the audience. I know there we go.
Is my mic on? Yes? Okay,
Yep.
great. So we have time for one question. We had a few come in. Thank you for all of those who submitted through the guidebook app. But the first one that came in was for the speakers, if you could imagine an economy not dependent on plastic. So much innovation comes from plastic recycling, but plastic is a finite material.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Did you get the question? Was it a statement or a question? I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah. No, they were wondering if you could imagine an economy not dependent on plastic.
Rick, you want to give a perspective on that?
So I don't see our economy dependent on plastic. If you look at what plastic does, though, in the marketplace, I think that it would be a challenge to create the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions that plastics brings without having plastics there. So think about steel automobiles. If you don't have plastics, you're going to have steel automobiles, and how are you going to make an electric car out of that? Think about food waste. And the key thing about food waste, 40% of food goes to waste worldwide. Now, it goes to waste differently in third world countries as compared to modern economies, but the same thing, it's 40%. And the key thing is what extends shelf life is plastic packaging. So what I'm basically saying is it is a material that when you got to use it right, you got to figure out how to best work it into the economy. But I think that without plastic, there would be tremendous challenges to our modern way of life.
Yep.
I mean, plastic is easily extrudable, moldable, put in different forms, shapes, sizes. It has a lot of utility. For me, with petrochemically produced plastic, the importance is being able to recapture all of it and repurpose it as new feedstock for new material. But even more, we're already in an age where we can produce plastics without petrochemical processes. We have a joint venture in DSM called Reverdia, where we have the capacity to produce biosuccinic acid, which is a precursor for a lot of engineered plastics, through a biological process. And I think more and more we're going to see society have the capability to produce plastic, again, through biological processes, which makes them much more reusable, but also biodegradable. And so plastic won't go away, but maybe the nature of plastic will change.
Excellent. Do we have time for one more?
I don't believe so, actually.
Okay. Time's up. Well, thanks for the questions. Thanks you. Thanks, Rick, for the panel. Just a couple of takeaways from my side from what was mentioned. Starting by design, you mentioned that the need for simplification, decomplexification, both in terms of the materials we use, the products we use, and then the way we actually collect and sort them. The need for scale and the need for collaboration across the system. Thanks again very much, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Rick. Thanks you and John, who had to scoot. So we are now going to transition to our first set of working sessions. They're all listed in the app, as well as the room locations. There will be staff outside to direct you to the appropriate room. So between now and 11:20, please use the restroom, stretch your legs, grab some snacks out there, and make your way to the breakout session rooms. Also, there are still spaces left for the dinners this evening. So on your way to your session, please check registration. If you see an opening for a dinner that you're interested in attending, please do sign up for that. And then finally, please come back in for lunch for our expert-led lunch discussions. So we have more attendees than we have tables with speakers that are leading a discussion. So please check the app and see all of the different topics and speakers that are going to be at the lunch in this room, and try to get here as early as possible to get a seat. And then if they happen to all be filled, there'll be other tables in here where you are, of course, welcome to sit and just chat with your colleagues next to you. And then we will resume our programming then. So thank you so much, and let's move to our quick break and our working sessions. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with the last part of our program this afternoon. So this is a special announcement, and I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Lawrence Bowdish, who is the lead for research and food security here at the Corporate Citizenship Center. And as many of you know, you've also heard me say he's also my circular economy wingman. Also would like to welcome Drew Vrena, who leads Tarkett's product sustainability efforts. And he's responsible for developing emotional product experiences. I'd love to talk to you about that. That's fantastic. And scalable business models and platform roadmaps. And then finally, Dr. Carol Mars, who is the senior research lead for the Sustainability Consortium, where she leads research initiatives and applications of TSC's work in supporting circular business models. So please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to talk about the circular economy toolbox that we have worked on together for a long time. Happy to have put it out very recently. Happy to see everyone get their hands on it. It's available through the guidebook, so I really heartily recommend you all go look at it. First, I'd like Drew to talk a little bit about his experience at Tarkett, why Tarkett is really into this space. Now, for those of you who don't know, one of Tarkett's main offices is in Solon, Ohio, a Cleveland suburb. Drew currently lives in Columbus, my former hometown. OH, get out. Everybody get out until we get it right. Seriously, no. Drew, I'm sorry, if you would please tell us a little bit about Tarkett's space, and we'll tell everyone about the toolbox.
Sure. Thank you. So at Tarkett, we are a flooring manufacturer, both resilient and soft surface. If you don't know, you probably don't know a lot of brands under our umbrella: Deso, Tandis Tiva, Johnsonite, all Tarkett brands. So what we like to say at Tarkett is really that the future is good. And why do we say that? I was in India. I just came back from India last week, and I participate in the startup ecosystem there, helping companies, B Corp type companies or startups scale up their innovations, and it's exciting times for them because suddenly they have these millions of people every 5 years or so coming out of the class below into middle class, and that's a huge potential for them. Well, that's just India. When we look at the global economy, about 5 billion people would be in this economy by the year 2030. So we already have over 2 billion people as of today. and the next 13 years or so, we would add another 3 billion people to the economy. So it's good for business, right? So many people are coming out of poverty into middle class, a lot of construction all around, good for business. But that also tells us that to sustain ourselves and really to do more than sustaining, we need to conserve the resources. There's only so much we have. So Target's strategy is multi-pronged, like most corporations. But what I really want to focus on today is our good materials strategy, what that is, and how does that feed into this circular economy initiative. So before our customers asked us what's in your products, we started that journey about 7 years ago, knowing what is really in our products and eliminating chemicals of concern that are in red lists and other lists today. We started that journey about 7, 8 years ago. We know 95% of our raw materials today. As of today, our goal is to know 100% by 2020, so we are very close to meeting our goal. How does that help with circularity? We are a big user of PVC in our products, and leading the responsible use of PVC network, for example, with our competitors, gives us that scale that we alone as a manufacturer cannot get to. So knowing what's in our products, having the clean PVC in the loop, the goal is to forever have that PVC come back into the circular loop, into the circular economy, and have this abundant material, into the product mix. With the toolbox, I've also been an entrepreneur in my past life, and I know that your idea is only as good as you can take it to the next level, and there's not many levels after that. But to amplify really your idea, you need collaborators, you need partners. That's where the foundation came in, and that's where we are with the circular economy toolbox. We want to have partners to grow this movement. We want to learn from others and really take this initiative forward to the next level and the level beyond. Thank you.
That's really great. Thanks, Dhruv. And one of the reasons why I think it's great that Target has really helped us out with this is when we started this process, so I work very closely with Jennifer Gerholdt, if you've seen up here, sort of the force behind this. She loves keeping me busy. And really wanted to make sure that we could develop something that really helped small companies, entrepreneurs, all large companies, either get involved with circular economy, get more involved with it, make these partnerships, make these connections. Because one of the things I often say, and every time I talk to a large audience, I think Hall of Flags echoes this every time I say it. I've been to probably 8 to 9 sustainability type conferences in the past 6 months. You would be lucky to pick out maybe 400 different companies out of those 8 different conferences. A lot of them are double booked. There are 6 million companies in the United States. Let that sink in. So if you want to reach the other 5.99999 million companies in the United States, one of the best ways to do that is through our network. The Chamber network, regionally and local, has a great way to make sure that we can help smaller companies, medium-sized companies, these part of this 5.9 million, really reach their goals, not only in circular economy, but everything else we work on. And so we've really gotten pretty good, I would say, at CCC and the foundation, to really put together these types of tools in a way that's really particularly helpful for everybody. And so when I investigated the types of tools that were available already, they were great. They were great. A lot of them, however, were vertical in nature. And so if a company went and looked at it, they could determine, am I circular based on my usage of plastic number 2, nylon, PVC, metal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or am I circular based on my level of sales or based on my manufacturing? Which is great for a lot of the large companies that have that information, or for the ones that are really scientifically savvy. Now, what really helped us out is that you're going to see probably 30 to 40 people walk across the stage. I am the dumbest of them all. I had one chemistry class in high school. This is honest to God truth. Chemistry. We raised chickens in a chicken pen in the classroom. We didn't do anything to them. It wasn't chemistry, right? That's how much chemistry I know. So it was helpful that I think I sort of came in with more of a business mindset about how can we build something that any business can understand. Because if you're in a business and want to do something with circularity and you can't keep up with me in chemistry, you've got a real problem. So we put together something that really talked about the business models required. Right? Instead of looking at your manufacturing chains, your supply chains, your value chains, what horizontal connections need to be made? Right? Everything we do, we had both Tarkett dealing with carpet. We had Hugh Welsh here a couple hours ago talking about their carpet program, which is great. But the problem is, how are you going to get that carpet back in the hands of the consumer? This toolkit's not going to tell you how to make carpet. It's going to help you figure out how you're going to get that carpet back. What's the business model required to complete that loop? Or you're trying to figure out how to measure any type of circularity. How do you communicate your circularity? Is it a useful branding mechanism? Can you use it to help out your views of your own sentiment in the public? So these are the ways we really wanted to use our ability to reach small and medium companies across the country and around the world, no matter where they are, what type of company they are, to learn how to get engaged in the circular economy, make those partnerships, and move forward, because circular economy is something that we all have to do together. So I'd like Carol to talk a little more, since she is one of the smarter people out of 30 you'll see come across the room. There's a lot more chemistry than I do. I'd like to have her talk a little bit more about the deeper insights.
And so for the Sustainability Consortium, our focus has always been on looking at consumer goods supply chains in a very holistic fashion and taking the entire life cycle into account when you're talking about sustainability within consumer goods. We're very, our work and our methodology is grounded very much in life cycle analysis. And as we have evolved our work, we started to see exactly how linear the conversations in sustainability about supply chains are, and how only in the last couple of years really have people started thinking about how do you bend that, and how do you create a circle, and then how do you communicate that? And so our opportunity with the Circular Economy Toolbox was to take the science and the work that we've done on understanding product sustainability and start to think about that in a circular fashion, and how do we adapt our work to this new way of thinking about supply chains. And so this has served for us as a great opportunity to start thinking about that. And within that platform, not only thinking about what it means to be circular, but also how do you measure it, and to start those conversations. And one of the things that I think we've done very well with this toolbox is to, when you're looking at metrics, not just the big final, this product is circular. It's like, if you're new, if you're a small company, that's very intimidating, because you don't have that information. You might not even have any idea how to get that information. What do you start with? You start with recycled content. You start with recycling. And that's one of the really great things about the toolbox, is bringing those little insights to the companies that are going to need them to start the journey. There's a lot of examples, and we've pulled together a really nice database of all the different types of approaches people are taking to making this circular transition. And wrapping that all together into one place is, we've created the toolbox, and we hope that over the next couple of days you have a chance to look at it, poke around in it, give us feedback on it, because we are very interested in improving and continually evolving this so that it is a tool, and does provide companies the ability to change or to look at their processes differently.
Excellent. And that's a great point, Carol, because one of the things I want to sort of add to, even though we've got about 110 different projects in here, which is one of the larger repositories of circular economy projects you'll find on the interweb. One of the things I want to make sure that everyone sort of has in mind is that this is not a sort of static document. Like the Constitution, it's a living document, and I want to make sure that there's a way that anyone in the room get engaged. There's an easy way to submit your projects. We have a link for that also in the app through the toolbox. You can reach out to me directly to get any projects on there if you have any questions, because usually what we do is nothing ever really dies. I sort of expect everything we do to live on and continue to add value. One of the ways we want this to add value is to figure out how we can use it to leverage the next step. And often I'm stuck doing that. I'm sorry, when I say we, I mean the royal we. CCC is often left doing that inductively. We sort of have to just ask around and see what's needed. But I think with something like this, with conversation this is had both here and other places, we're able to do this deductively. And I think we'll be able to tell what's really needed in the business space to make sure this continues.
So it's a circular evolution, just like everything else.
So it is circular as well. Thank you, Carol. That's absolutely correct. And I again encourage you to go check it out. Also, I saw Brandon from WBCSD across the room earlier. Is Brandon, are you in here still? Brandon? So they also have a tool called the CEO Guide, which you might see the papers for out there. And I think we also have a link to it in our app store as well. They talked about it yesterday. And thankfully, when sort of Brandon originally told me they were working on it, I was a little concerned because it sounded a lot like what we were doing. But it works really well. There's sort of like two jigsaw pieces that sort of work, and I think they interact beautifully in a way that using them together, I think any company across the world can really engage their circular economy needs, their goals. Again, love to talk to you about it. And with that, any closing comments, guys? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
You try to leave this place better for your future generations, but if you go to a landfill, you just in awe how all the stuff's accumulating, and we're basically just compacting it and burying it. There's got to be a better way.
Ramco Environmental is a turnkey environmental service company.
We started Ramco Environmental in 2011 with one truck and two guys in Central Arkansas. We figured out what we were good at, grew the business. So from 2011 with two guys and one truck, 2017 we're at 30 plus trucks with 3 regional offices. The big companies that we do go against, their landfill is one of their biggest revenue generators. One, we don't own one. Anything we can kind of divert out of the landfill and be able to recycle it, that's one of the goals that we try to do.
Instead of setting an 8-yard trash container, how about we set a 4-yard trash container and a 4-yard recycle container? That way, all that waste you're generating in your office, your cardboard, your paper, your plastic bottles, let's extract that, take it to a recycle center, and let's make something out of it, because there is value to it.
Rubicon was wanting to enter the Tupelo, Mississippi market, and so they reached out to us and asked if we would be interested in going to Tupelo, Mississippi to help them out. So we made a visit down here in November, started operations 30 days later.
Technology really helps us out, and Rubicon has really been able to take us to the next level. One, with technology, and two, with helping us grow our business. Once you start an operation from the ground up, you get one truck, one driver, you add another truck in 6 months, you add another truck in 6 months. That's what a successful operation is supposed to do. And Rubicon has allowed us to do that in Tupelo, and we're full steam ahead.
Please welcome panel moderator Matthew Swibel, Director, Corporate Sustainability, Lockheed Martin.
Good afternoon. Thank you to our fellow panelist, David Rachelson, for providing a video that gets to the main point of what this panel is about, which is asking questions, spurring some dialogue on to what extent the circular economy works for the people in the economy. To what degree, beyond technological challenges, does the circular economy translate into sustainable economic growth? There are a lot of panels and a lot of discussions at this conference that understandably talk about opportunity. But like any classic SWOT analysis, what is an opportunity for some stakeholders is perceived as a threat to others. So when we're talking about transitioning to a circular economy, it's going to require substantial expansion of the knowledge base. It's going to mean answering lots of questions related to production structures, finance structures, and some of those conversations were evident during lunchtime. So thanks to Jennifer Gerholdt for having the courage to include this panel in the agenda and advance the discussion beyond some of the technology opportunities. In this panel, and as the video showed, there's a great example of how reuse can play a role in job creation, but it's also important to remember that the circular economy is also about extending the useful working life of products. Sometimes that involves recycling, but I'm sure Michael Murphy from Dell will also comment on what it means at the product development stage, making durability improvements and what that means as well. At Lockheed Martin, that is a major part of our business model in terms of making sure our products stay in the economy many times longer than today. This week actually, we just learned that the United States Air Force determined that the F-22, which is made in Marietta, very close to where David's from, is going to be lasting until 2060. That when it's designed for 8,000 flight hours, now that it's been used for a period of time, the Air Force is confident it can last up to 15,000 hours. So those are design decisions made very early on in a product development life cycle that bring about the same exact kind of benefits that are part of the circular economy principles, whether or not they're called that. And so we'll get into the labeling in just a moment. And just a few quick statistics. I think that it's great to see that there's a research element to this program, and we need more research. But for some of the research that is available, I'd like to point out, in the state of Illinois, they examined the equivalency of what the job equation is for 1,000 tons of electronic waste. If you're going to send it to landfill, it creates about 1 job. If you're going to recycle all of that tonnage, it translates into, they estimate, into 15 jobs. But there are 200 jobs created in repair and refurbishment activities. In the United Kingdom, they examined all of the different, in all the different regions of the United Kingdom, what the different job skill clusters that exist, and they estimate by adopting circular economy practices in 12 different sectors, there will be about 205,000 jobs created by 2030. But most importantly, that's a net job creation of 54K. So net job creation. Certainly we know in this political and domestic economic environment, that is very much the name of the game. So with that, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to quickly introduce themselves by explaining what organization they're representing and what they would characterize as their biggest or proudest moment thus far in navigating the circular economy.
All right, well, I get to start first. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ginger Spencer. I'm with the City of Phoenix, and I'm Public Works Director there. I'm the lady that, when you hear me, I love to talk trash. And so Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the nation. We send 1 million tons of trash to the landfill each and every year. And so that's a whole lot of trash. And of course, we want to do something other than sending it to the landfill. We want to divert it. So for us, circular economy just made total sense. And so I've been with the city 20 years and been in the Public Works Department half of my career. We do fleet facilities and solid waste. So my proudest moment, or our proudest moment in the city of Phoenix, is we have a resource innovation campus, which you're going to hear a little bit more about that. But we recently opened a 27-acre composting facility. And that's going to help us move the needle when it comes to diverting waste from the landfill. So this is industrial scale, top of state-of-the-art technology. We're going to be able to make compost in 45 to 60 days. We're going to sell it on the market, we're going to give some back to residents, and we're going to use it in our parks. So that's something we're really, really proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Rachelson. It's great to be here. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting us. I'm with Rubicon Global. You saw a little bit about us in the video, but ultimately what we are is a technology platform that connects a network of over 5,000 small, medium, and independent haulers of waste and recycling, such as Ramco, who was in the video, with customers. And we're built on a sustainable platform. We're asset light. We don't own landfills, and we really believe that there's a better way to dispose of materials than sending them to a landfill. And so that's what we're really focused on doing every day as a business. I would say that the things that we're most proud of is exactly what we saw in the video, which is that our business model is creating jobs and bringing the circular economy to places like Tupelo, Mississippi. And so that's probably what we're most proud of.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'm Michael Murphy. I'm with Dell. I lead our global product compliance engineering team and environmental affairs organization. As part of that, I serve on our Sustainability Steering Council and our Circular Economy Steering Council. The Circular Economy Steering Council actually came out of probably one of my prouder moments with our organization, in that we were able to close the loop on materials utilization from our products that we put in the field back through our recycling environmental partners, and then putting those materials back into our product for remanufacturing and new product manufacturing, specifically around plastics. We'll talk to some of the aspects of that today on the panel. That project, we've scaled from a single project in 2015 to about 90 different products that include this post-consumer recycled content plastic. We put about 11 million pounds of that PCR product back into our products on an annual basis. And in a very thin margin IT electronics space, we save a couple $1 million a year by utilizing that post-consumer recycled content, which meets federal purchasing and institutional purchasing requirements in the US and globally.
Great. I started out my career as a business journalist, so during the networking breaks and at lunch, I was listening very carefully to some of the conversations that were occurring, and a few different times people were commenting on, when did this become so complicated? Didn't we used to bring in, unused cans and bottles, and is recycling, isn't that sort of an old paradigm? Why is there so much complexity? And it was interesting because as a panel, we discussed, to what extent the terminology of circular economy is helpful to translating the economic growth, the smart business outcomes. So this truly is a national panel, from Arizona to the Southeast to Texas. Can you shed some light based on your responsibilities, the communities of interest and stakeholders that you engage with? When do you use circular economy? When do you take that behind the curtain? And when, how helpful, or to what degree has it been a hindrance in translating what this means for your organizations?
I'll comment first. Within Dell internally, if it isn't smart business, it really doesn't have any term that's sticky. Externally, we tend to use the term circular economy, but we did not start down the path with our closed-loop plastics or other circular economy initiatives to be circular. We were putting together either a need or a customer-driven demand or a brand or responsibility-driven demand for our company. But the term circular economy is, I guess, about 30 years old. It comes out of the sustainability space, but what transcends all time is, if it's smart business, it's probably sustainable. But short answer is internal, we're talking smart business. Externally, we may use circular economy, but it's always paired up with it's good for our customer and good for our brand.
We totally believe that smart business is very important. We're a certified benefit corporation, so we are a company that is focused on delivering not only shareholder value, but also value to society or the environment. And we were actually founded because of the demand for the circular economy and sustainability. The inspiration in a lot of ways for our company's creation was the 2005 Walmart Zero Waste to Landfill commitment. And that showed the company and our leaders that there is a new model that needs to be had. And so to us, that is very important. In terms of circular economy as a phrase, I think and we think that it's actually a pretty intuitive phrase once people start to understand it. This is transformational, as the gentleman from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation said earlier, going from a linear to a circular economy. And in keeping with the topic of this panel, there is enormous job growth and innovation that's going to happen as a result of this. We're just one example of it, but it's happening every day. And it's also happening in large part to the demand that my fellow panelists have. You know, Lockheed, Dell, the city of Phoenix are looking for solutions to create a circular economy and a more sustainable economy. And so, you know, it seems as though we're on a good path towards really realizing this. Obviously, work needs to be done, but it seems like traction's really being gained.
And in Phoenix, we've been recycling now for over 30 years. And I remember about 10 years ago, we started talking about sustainability. But sustainability was so broad. I remember it was just difficult trying to come up with one definition for sustainability. And so, you know, was it greenhouse gas reduction? Was it you know, alternative fleet, you know, making sure our buildings were energy efficient. It was just very, very broad. But when it came to circular economy, that was an easier sell. It was easier to explain. It was, you know, instead of having the linear model where it's take, make, dispose, or I like to say take, make, waste, right? Waste is going to the landfill. It was building that circular economy, and how can we actually keep the product in the waste, or in the stream, right? How can we repurpose it? So we're all about recycle, reuse, reuse. You just put your RE in front of whatever, remanufacture. That's what circular economy is. And it's so funny. I carry this little red chip. So I came to my first conference, chamber conference, about 3 years ago. And Ellen MacArthur was here from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And the CEO of Veolia Transportation was here. And he passed out these red chips. And basically what these red chips are what we send to our wastewater treatment plants. It's what you flush down the toilet. And what they've been able to do is take that waste and turn it into plastic. And so when I go and I meet with our elected officials, right? And I go and meet with folks, I show them this red chip. This is the creativity, this is the innovation that can come from a circular economy. And so again, and it's all about job creation. So that's something that resonates with our elected officials. And also too, a lot of our recyclables, again, 30 years, we've been sending those to China and relying on that market. But how can we create, you know, the market locally or even regionally and send that, the materials, you know, in Phoenix or even to our neighboring sisters cities or even other states. And so that's what circular economy is about. And to me, it's very easy to explain that.
Ginger, can you also, let's stay with you. Can you describe a significant non-technology-based challenge that you've overcome in cascading circular economy practices in the city?
Yeah. So, you know, what circular economy is all about: innovation, job creation, and technology. But one of the non-technical challenges that we've had to deal with is just changing consumer behavior, right? So on the West Coast and sometimes even on the East Coast, you're able to legislate and mandate and, you know, ask your residents to do what you want. And you got an incentive there. Well, in Phoenix, everything we do is on a voluntary basis. And so we're really trying to change individuals' behavior. We're trying to get them excited about recycling, you know, and also too, we're introducing the circular economy. So how do we do that? And so that's something we've had to work at. And so we actually are working with an organization, Recycle Bank, bank. And they're coming and they're helping us increase awareness to our residents. And then also too, we've heard from the speakers today, when it comes to recycling, all of our programs are different. Why is it so complex? You even mentioned it yourself. That, how can we simplify this message? So one of the things we're doing with our consumers is we're working with Keep America Beautiful, and they have their top 10 in the bin program. And so what we've done is we've incorporated that in Phoenix. Like if you don't do anything else, just recycle these top 10 things, and this will be the biggest bang for your buck. And then we're also working with Valley cities to get them to come on board as well. So that way we're all giving the same message.
And David, what about you in terms of stakeholder engagement and scalability?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That is so vital to advancing the circular economy. This is a part of sustainability that's not as simple as turning off your light switch or turning off the faucet. It really takes knowledge and some level of understanding of how to dispose of materials, or rather how to reuse them or extend their life. So, you know, one of the things that we do at Rubicon is we really focus on educating the staff of the companies that we work with. We will send our employees out to do trainings. Where do you place a bin? How do you actually sort materials, et cetera? Or we'll deploy it on an e-learning platform. But either way, it's very important for consumers, customers, employees to understand the value that exists in materials and how the best way to use them after their intended life has expired, but there's still ongoing life in the product.
And then there probably is instilling a sense of shared accountability in growing the business.
Right.
And translating that into bigger employment.
Well, absolutely. And you know, if there's excessive waste, there's usually something's being run inefficiently. And so it actually helps organizations operate more efficiently and better understand their supply chain and procurement needs as a result.
And Michael, I think you have a good example that's a little bit more policy oriented and how that, you know, what the calculus is in terms of policy change and economic growth.
Yeah, lead into that. I mean, you talked about the vernacular and the term circular economy. The terms used inside sustainability and circular economy are things that we also need to be changing to enable a more global and local circular economy. One of those in our industry is e-waste. It's not a term that I really like. In the context of circular economy, you certainly need to be looking at it as e-resources. And to the policy front, there's the Basel Convention limits the transboundary shipment of that word I don't really care for, but it doesn't really enable the transboundary shipment of e-resources. To the project I referred to around closing the loop on plastics, we had to overcome some transboundary shipment issues from collection of e-resources in the US and the ability to ship those bundled plastics back to China for reformulation in a $40 million plus investment of IP to create post-consumer recycled content, ABS and PCABS. So overcoming those policy hurdles that were put in place for responsible reasons for bad actors and bad behavior, we've got to knock those down to enable the movement of those resources to the right manufacturing base to get them back into the economy. And we've had some success there. But there are opportunities to do that same type of work in other countries and in the US. But collecting everything local is not the only answer. It's part of the answer. In a globally commoditized industry with respect to IT hardware, it's important to get certain materials back to the manufacturing base where that exists. So overcoming those policy hurdles, we're on the path to solving that in some localities, but not all.
Ginger, can you elaborate a little bit about, in Phoenix, even though it's oriented around a voluntary basis, weren't you able to document job growth of small businesses that were part of the work that you've done?
Yes, so basically in 2013, our mayor, Greg Stanton, and city council, what they did was they established a Reimagine Phoenix initiative. And for us, that was setting a very ambitious goal that we would divert 40% of our waste from the landfill on a volunteer basis. And so part of making the case, right, of everything we do, because in the for-profit sector, it's all about return on investment, right? And so we're making major purchases, our major investments in diverting waste from the landfill. So we had to make a business case for that as well. So for us, when we send waste to the landfill, it costs us $17 a ton. 17 times 1 million tons of trash each and every year. So basically what we looked at is we're willing to work with businesses, nonprofits, that sort of thing, if we can save money. So we've been able to add like 5 new programs without increasing our rates to our customers. And the reason that we were able to do that was because in some cases, if we were working with the organization and they wanted us to pay to take our waste, it was less than $17, we'd be willing to do that. So we have a partnership with Goodwill of Central Arizona. They're taking our mattresses, right? Big, bulky, they go to the landfill to die. And they stay there for a long, long, long time. And so we're paying them $7 per mattress to take it. And it's cheaper than sending it to the landfill. We have other companies that are willing to pay us to take the waste from us, or some looks like resource. And in other cases, we just do an exchange. So there is a business case for this. And even with our compost facility that we opened up, 27 acre, that was a $14 million construction project. Another $2 million we spent in equipment alone. So making the case for that. But again, when we looked at our waste stream, we knew that 30% of what we're currently sending to the landfill was yard waste. So that was low-hanging fruit. Our electeds were willing to make that investment. So our mayor has said, you know, when it comes to this, it's not just good policy, but it's good business, and that's why we're doing this.
So now I'd like to ask the panel for a continuation of, what are you looking at as the next moonshot? If the mayor sort of used that Reimagine Phoenix as an opportunity to set some big, audacious goals, what do you see as the next chapter, and then for each of your organizations as well?
Okay. So, in Phoenix, we like to go big. So 40% by 2020, and then after that, we're going to zero waste by the year 2050. So very ambitious goals. We got a lot of work to do. We are building a resource innovation campus. So basically, that's where we have a closed landfill, we have our recycling facility, we have our transfer station, we now have the composting facility, and we are inviting businesses, manufacturers to come and basically set up shop on our campus, take our waste, right, and repurpose it into a resource. And so that's where we're going with this. And so we're working with Arizona State University as well with the Resource Innovation and Solutions Network. And so if you are an entrepreneur, an innovator, and you have an idea, we're building a technology solutions incubator on that campus so we can help take your ideas from concept, right, to fruition. And so we've actually landed our first company that's going to be a part of this Resource Innovation Campus, and it's a really cool concept. Their name is Palm Silage, and what they're doing is they're taking our palm fronds that we were currently sending to the landfill. We couldn't mulch it, we couldn't turn it into compost because it would mess up the equipment, it would get caught in the equipment. And they're actually combining it with animal dates, and they're turning it into livestock feed. So again, we just put a call for innovators. It's a sexy way of saying request for information. And we said, hey, we're having a problem with palm fronds. Our city manager actually said that. Tell us about your great ideas. And we got some wonderful ideas from across the globe. And so again, we're looking for more companies to come like that to our Resource Innovation Campus. And that's the next wave for us to get to zero waste.
Well, David, not to put you on the spot, but you want to do a soft commitment right now?
We'd be glad to come.
Okay, so we're making news.
Well, and I was going to actually say before you said that I was going to congratulate the city of Phoenix because, that is, we found that cities are at the forefront of this, and Phoenix is known throughout the industry as being a leader in sustainability. So that's really great to hear. So let's give them a round of applause. Absolutely. I think our moonshot is pretty well aligned. Our company was founded on this belief that there's a better way to dispose of materials than a landfill, and so our moonshot would be a zero waste future, and we're focused on that, and that's why this organization that we're here with today and other organizations are so vital, and it's so heartening to see cities and companies demanding a circular economy. And it clearly is, I think the circular economy itself, in its own way, is a moonshot to really transform a way of operating that has not changed since the time of the Romans. The Romans used to bury their materials that they didn't want. And so to really change that takes a lot of ingenuity and energy, and that's why it's been so energizing to be here with everyone today. But I think with the minds in this room and the commitment and the smart business, it's going to happen.
Do you have like a rough order of magnitude of, if you were able to, increase your business or double your business, what kind of job growth that might translate to? Or do you have any, orders?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very significant. So the video we just saw, Ramco started with one truck and a couple staff, and over the course of a few years, they now have 30 trucks and dozens more staff, and they're just one of 5,000 companies in our network. So this is going to be very significant, and I actually think it's going to be a great source of job creation, innovation, and opportunity. And I think it's up to all of us to kind of evangelize the circular economy and make sure that people start to understand it more and understand the business reasons behind it. And I totally agree with Ginger that it's a very easy way to connect sustainability and job creation and economic development.
Michael?
So our Legacy of Good plan for 2020, which we started in 2013, kind of outlines the product packaging stewardship moonshots that we're trying to achieve. And really they're around 4 different areas. One is around the energy intensity of our products, reducing it by 80% by 2020. We're well on track to deliver that. I suspect we'll be just short of that goal, but we're driving to that 80% energy intensity reduction. We're trying to collect, tied back to circular economy, 2 billion pounds of electronics by 2020, and we're well on track to delivering that. In our packaging portfolio, we're shooting to have 100% renewable packaging materials across our portfolio. And then tied back to our closed-loop plastics, we had a goal of 50 million pounds of PCR integrated into our products by 2020. Because of our closed-loop plastics program, we actually achieved that this year. We've doubled down on that goal to 100 million pounds by 2020. And really, those 4 goals, but tied to circular economy and closed loop, we're trying to scale those closed loop offerings as a hedge to material availability beyond plastics. We chose plastics because if you could do it there and make the economics work, you could certainly do that in other areas around metals and precious metals. So we're looking at ways that we can integrate precious metals and materials back into our product portfolio. Once again, some of the challenges are policy-based, but overcoming those should allow us to integrate more and more materials from our product back into our product. It's interesting, you mentioned you were a partner with Goodwill. This is about job creation. It's interesting if you just go through the reverse logistics or the value chain of a circular economy offering, I think at some point we may talk about displacement, but it's really incremental job growth that we're seeing. Whether it's in the design front, where engineers are adding capability to their design resume. With respect to our take-back partners, we too are a partner with Goodwill. We offer free consumer take-back around the globe, 83 different countries, in addition to our commercial offerings. But in the US, that's a partnership with Goodwill. So every Goodwill franchise, almost, in the US is a partner with Dell as an environmental partner. Not just creating jobs for collecting materials that are going back into the reverse logistics stream, but adding additional value creation in those businesses has been very important. So we've driven more value for a partner like Goodwill in what maybe at one time was going for incineration, for energy creation. There's greater value being created in that reverse logistics area. So we continue to work across our value chain to, one, create jobs, but also create innovation that allows better utilization of materials.
We're a very well synchronized panel because we're planting conversation segues at the appropriate times. I would also encourage, if you have questions, to get those ready, because we have one more discussion point before that time, and it's a somewhat uncomfortable one. And I guess I'd ask each of you to sort of raise the perspective at the macro level. There are examples of job creation, right? But we're also talking about transitioning different systems in the economy. And going back to the opening of our session, it could be perceived as a damaging change to those who may not have the skills or job holders who are being disrupted. So how would each of you sort of make the pitch, whether it's to businesses that you're recruiting for your campus and making sure you're not disturbing the economic ecosystem of businesses that may be thinking, I'm going to be a loser in this equation, or in the different businesses that might see your business model as a disruption, right? How do you broker those trade-offs? And then, Dell at a macro level certainly is a disruptive, innovative company introducing scalable technology. So, to what degree do you see the transitioning workforce issues as relevant to scaling this scaling circular economy? Maybe we'll start with David.
No, that's a great question. And, that's certainly a topic that is, talked about a lot right now, which is technology and disruption, a net positive, or does it have, longer term impacts? We actually feel like we found a really good sweet spot. And the video that we just saw is an example of that. So you may have seen that the Ramco employees had an iPhone with an app, and that's our technology platform that is allowing them to grow their business, right? So it's actually an example of technology creating jobs in some of the hardest and most rural parts of the US. And moreover, I think that from our perspective, we have seen where the industry is headed. Big, major companies in this room demanding circular economy solutions. So from our perspective, we're trying to help the industry move in a direction that is going to be able to receive the benefits of that, as opposed to kind of staying in the old ways and not being prepared. So we're trying to use technology and the circular economy together to be able to generate positive job growth and economic value by looking ahead and being prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly logistics efficiencies that you're driving through the app, so you may need fewer logistics analysts, but
right.
you need app developers.
Right, and I think if it's done, that's right, and I think if it's done properly, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation came out a few years ago, as I'm sure everyone in here knows, with a report that said there's $1 trillion of global job value that can be created by 2025 in the circular economy. And I think I think that there perhaps could be shifts in where those jobs exist, but I really think that there will be a net positive job benefit from embracing the circular economy, as opposed to staying in the kind of the make, take, waste, or take, make, waste model that, a lot of folks, are still in.
Okay. So after your comment, let's open up for questions.
Okay. Michael, did you have a comment? Or?
Go ahead, Ginger.
Okay. So for us in Phoenix, we don't shy away from technology. We actually see this as a complement to what we're doing. And, we've been embracing innovation in solid waste industry for a long, long time. So, I remember when we had the guys in the back of the truck, picking up the garbage, loading it in and that sort of thing. Then we went to side loaders, we had single stream, that sort of thing. We didn't lose any jobs. We still need someone to drive the truck, right? Even at our MRFs, we have state-of-the-art technology there. We still need folks to sort the waste. So the jobs are still there. And I mentioned Arizona State University, our Resource Innovation and Solutions Network. We have a RISN agreement, a partnership with them. And they're basically our research arm for what we do in the city. And they did an economic impact study, and they're still working on it. So once we get it done, we'll be happy to share this information with attendees. But what they found, just looking at Maricopa County, is they looked at recycling, at the economic impact of recycling, repair, and reuse, right? And what they found was the economic value, what it came up to be was about 1.9 billion, right, in gross state product, so equivalent to your GDP. It created 35,000 jobs, and this is just in Maricopa County in 2014. And then labor income was was 1.2 billion, right? And then it brought in another 158 million in tax revenue. So, I mean, compared to sitting it to the landfill where you get zero, I think one of our speakers mentioned that earlier, a negative value, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so again, we're not seeing the displacement, we're actually seeing job creation, so.
Great. Any questions?
Hi. We've had a number of questions come in through the app, so I have a few here. The first question is how you can use the circular economy to spur economic growth in areas that have high unemployment rates.
How do you spur economic growth in areas that may have higher unemployment rates? I thought the video might be a good example of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it depends on where on the spectrum, the job creation happens. But, we have found that our hauler partners are some of the hardest working men and women in the U.S. and, and oftentimes, sometimes do come from areas of low economic, opportunity. And we're very pleased that our business has facilitated a way for them to get a job, a good paying job.
I think it comes down a little bit to a labeling question. Just to give you an example from our business in San Antonio, we have an aircraft sustainment business where we're refurbishing, overhauling engines and other components to extend the life of aircraft. And unfortunately, San Antonio has one of the highest level of high school dropout rates, which leaves lower career opportunities for people who want to remain in that area. So Lockheed Martin and other aerospace companies created something called the Alamo Academy, which is really a co-op program. So we're exposing high school students even as young as in the freshman and sophomore year to some of the technical and career opportunities that are in that business. And it's been incredible to see statistical change of people who are part of Alamo Academy, not only their high school graduation rate, but their college readiness levels as well. And obviously there's great direct hire opportunities for aerospace companies that participate in that.
Great, thanks. We've also had a number of questions come in on the role of government, both at the federal level, state level, and local, on how they can support and work together with the business community to try to facilitate both job growth and circular economy innovations.
Well, I think you have a good example from Phoenix, speaking directly to local government. Are there any details about to what degree the state government played any kind of role in progress thus far?
At the local level, what I would say, the only thing I would add there is for us, it's about public-private partnerships, right? And leveraging resources. So we don't have to do everything in the city. We want to work with businesses to get there. When it comes to the state level, we don't necessarily have this in Phoenix, or in Arizona, excuse me, but in other states, in California, New York, and that sort of thing, they actually will legislate, right? And they'll set the goals from a statewide perspective, which makes it a little bit easier for cities. And then from a federal level, we just continue to look for grant opportunities and that sort of thing to help what we're trying to do at the local level. And sometimes that's few and far between, but this is exciting, and who knew that trash and economic development went together, right? And folks are willing to make an investment in that.
I was a little bit surprised at the relatively shallow well of research, nonpartisan research, that examines the economic impact of circular economy. Now, it may be a term that's been around for 30 years, but I think it's mostly in the last 7 to 10 years that there's been maybe more attention paid to it, and so maybe because of that, it hasn't generated a deep well of academic or nonpartisan research that would help provide some of those expectations when you're speaking to stakeholders about what does this translate to as an opportunity. The example you used, working with Arizona State University to do just that, I think we need to multiply probably by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples.
Great, thank you. We've also had about 3 questions come in that kind of spin around the idea of how you facilitate engagement in different communities. So one question touched on how you try to facilitate small businesses and try to bring them into the work you're doing. Another touched on retaining workers in industries that are not thriving in part of the circular economy, how you retain those workers. And then another talked about scale and how you can, when you're trying to scale up the work you're doing, how you maintain that engagement. And so all 3 of those kind of touched on that idea. If you guys could discuss that for a little bit.
I can talk to some. I mean, I'll go from local to international. With respect to our closed-loop plastics activity, I mean, the engagement with Goodwill, well, first starting inside our own 4 walls, I mean, across the 3 primary stakeholders of our development teams, our procurement team, and our take-back services team. And one of the big issues we had to overcome there was stepping back from how could we win as a team, and it might cost you more, but it costs us less, and getting across that paradigm, because an individual stakeholder may be having to do a little bit more, pay a little bit more initially, but the company overall would be better off by making the change. So getting that, we win collectively mindset was a little bit of a challenge. But then you go outside our 4 walls, the business relationship with Goodwill initially, plastics in particular, were not of much value. But then changing the economics of that, showing that applying some workforce to that collection, changed that business proposition not only, at the local Goodwill, but across a 7-state area, and we're scaling that now. When you go to our outside partners, part of that plastic flow then needed to go to a consolidator, a recycler. We stood up a specialized recycling capability. It's actually in McKinney, Texas. The local, and really that's aimed at not only recycling of plastics, but really urban mining, and changing the local policies and procedures for standing up a recycler that is aimed at urban mining from electronics. We worked through those challenges, and it certainly created a number of jobs in Texas that did not exist before. That operation also is looking to scale nationally and set up recycling capability in Atlanta and a couple of other places. And then you go to an international level where all of these materials needed to flow to a remanufacturing facility to take bulk plastics back to basically pelletized post-consumer recycled content in an area of Kunshan, China. Negotiating the ability to flow those materials, and then the economic and job creation locally within China, and then putting it back into our system of materials. I mean, each one of those basically had a different type of engagement. We had to work through all of those from inside our four walls, local, state, regional, and international. They've all proven that, I mean, you can create jobs, and you can, if you can scale it, it will continue to deliver ROI that is sustainable.
I can speak really fast to the small business aspect. That's been a big focus for Rubicon over the past 9 to 12 months, which is bringing our business model to the small business, to the mom and pop store. And you know, what we found is there's a huge thirst and demand for driving sustainable solutions and wanting to become a more circular business. And so I think the more that we can do to co-opt and attract and engage small and medium businesses, the more success we'll have in, you know, bringing this aspiration to implementation. And so that's something we've been really focusing on.
I was going to say, if I can add to that as well from a small business standpoint. So when we started our Reimagine Phoenix initiative and building the Resource Innovation Campus, what we did was we partnered Public Works Department, our Community Economic Development Department, and our partners with Arizona State University with the RISEN program. And we spent an entire month and we hit up just about every chamber in Phoenix, thought leaders, you name it. We were at the Black Chamber, the Phoenix Chamber, the Greater Phoenix Chamber. We were at the Green Chamber, and just meeting with small businesses and letting them know about these business opportunities. And also from a scalable standpoint, we look at trying to make sure that we can do our projects at scale. So when we did our compost facility, we're starting off with 55,000 tons, right? Then we're gonna ramp up to 110,000 tons, and then we're gonna go to 220,000 tons. And then also too, that helps you, we got the funding, right, that we needed for the 110, and then we'll continue to assemble it to get us to the 220.
Yeah, I guess I would just add a couple comments. One is, in terms of small businesses, one of the recent sales of Lockheed Martin products involves basically upgrading components for avionics to the Indonesian Air Force. And at the time the deal was announced, there were a number of companies in April, this past April, that that announced deals as part of a country-to-country level negotiation. And one of the interesting things was that it's a small business in Montana that's actually providing a low-emission waste-to-energy solution for a municipality in, a province in Indonesia. That was of interest to us because we actually also have an advanced gasification technology. That we have in upstate New York, we have a demonstration plant, and then also we have one that's almost finished in Germany. And when you think about a company, you know, as big as Lockheed Martin playing catch up to some of the small businesses in the waste-to-energy space, both low-emission solutions, I think there's evidence that as long as there's clear customer demand, American small businesses can compete on a global stage. In terms of scalability, I think it's sort of one and the same. There are a lot of great small businesses with solutions that, you know, may be applicable to subsectors which, if we're being honest, don't generate a tremendous amount of environmental impact. Every ounce helps, but in terms of scalability, we all know that there are a handful of sectors that, you know, if adoption accelerates, it's going to make a huge, huge difference. So in that context, I think we do see examples where there is either a state or federal policy incentive or understanding that this is not just about technology. This is about technology, job creation, risk mitigation, infrastructure resiliency. And when all of that is communicated in totality, I think that there seems to be a greater enthusiasm around implementing the solution.
Great, thanks.
We also received a question around technology, and if each of the panelists could speak to what technology gaps you see that could potentially, that are preventing the realization of a circular economy.
What technology gaps?
I can start. So I think that there are really not gaps, but opportunities. And so what we focus on a lot right now related to technology is how do you apply some of the latest buzzwords like machine learning or the industrial Internet of Things to the waste and recycling industry. We actually have a new app that you can take a picture of garbage, and a small business can do this, and it'll give them a waste characterization. So first and foremost, you'll be able to understand what's in your waste streams and then be able to look for solutions. So there may be a lot of styrofoam or plastic or other things in it. And so really trying to bring the latest industry innovation to the materials and the circular economy in the cities to try and accelerate our solutions and make them more adoptable.
I think that just as a segue to what you're saying, if you're thinking about sensors, if you're thinking about Internet of Things connectivity where you're combining web-enabled technology with operations technology, you must be thinking about cyber and digital security. So one of the gaps may be that there are, there's a lot of incentives to engineer a solution before you figure out what some of the security gaps might be. So if we are rushing toward adoption of IoT and anything really that has a sensor, you want the sensors to speak to each other and help you make more resource-efficient decisions, and you don't want to have that communication infiltrated. It's a business continuity risk, but it's also an information protection, intellectual property risk. So I would say that is what we see as a gap, particularly among 15,000 active suppliers with varying resources to apply to the cyber front.
Matt, we're seeing the same thing. I mean, we're starting to see the adoption of regulations in certain countries related to cybersecurity and information provision. I think that will flow into, I talked a lot about materials flows. I mean, the information associated with material flows across sectors and across countries, but the security of information is certainly a gap that is, there are laws being erected fairly quickly to try to prevent security breaches, and it's an ongoing challenge.
As David said, we see it as opportunities. So I have an offer from a city standpoint as a MRF operator. So MRF operator being both public or private. I think one of the things that would be helpful for us if there was some way that we could engage with manufacturers when they're actually designing products so that we could actually test it to see if it's going to be recyclable, in our equipment. We've got MRFs all across the nation, and again, public and private. And I think we'd all be willing to step up and help engage in that process. Again, pouches, they're great, right? They're lightweight, your little pouches for baby food or for juice, that sort of thing. They're lightweight, it's great. But because of the packaging, it's multiple products. And because of that, it's not recyclable in our MRFs. Again, there's some products that are very small, and what happens when it comes across our equipment, it's dropping through. So we're also trying to figure out technology as well, though, to capture some of those products so that it can be recycled. But again, if there was a way to at least test the product or engage with the end use, to see what the actual impact that would be an offer from us and something we'd be interested in. And again, you've got public and private MRF operators.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, guys. And thank you to everyone who's submitting questions to the app. We've had a lot come in. And so I think we have time for 2 more. And so the first, we just talked about gaps. And now someone has asked what the biggest barriers are to unlocking the additional value that comes from the circular economy in each of your respective areas.
I couldn't hear it, sorry.
Oh, sorry, the biggest barriers that you see.
The base barriers?
Biggest
biggest,
barriers.
okay.
Biggest barriers to unlocking the additional value from the circular economy.
I mean, at Dell, we've actually started implementing some circular economy offerings, talked to one extensively. One of the barriers, though, that we want to try to overcome is cross-sector collaboration. Another example, and we're working on 2 other projects right now and actively implementing them. One is we're taking aerospace carbon fiber scrap from major aircraft manufacturers and putting that back into our product. It's not closed loop, but it's certainly a circular economy activity. Identifying those other materials of great value that maybe are one other sector's lower value material, or opportunities to bring those into our product, and vice versa. We also are working on an initiative around ocean plastics and trying to mitigate risk to the ocean of plastics going into the ocean by collecting within 50 miles of the coast, putting that back into our packaging. But all of those really come back to, I mean, to do them at a great value for the planet, we need to be collaborating across multiple sectors to scale them to have the greatest impact. So scaling and collaboration are integrally tied together, and I think it's important.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually, building upon what Michael just said, and also what Ginger said, I think the greatest barrier, at least from where we sit in our industry, is having those not in destinations, but those destinations where you can take materials that's not a landfill, having enough of them, having the right ones that exist. And this is actually, I think, a really big opportunity for job creation, because there's so much opportunity and innovation out there to create areas where you can deliver materials to then repurpose them or reintroduce them into the supply chain. And so the more of those facilities that exist, the more innovative options that are out there, the easier it will be for companies like Lockheed Martin and Dell to get the products back into their supply chains to really complete the circle.
Yeah, I guess I think of the question both in terms of our product development and in our operations. So from a product development, I know a lot of our engineers are thinking less about how do you recycle, how do you use recycled materials, because frankly, the virgin materials are important for the long-lasting life of many of our products. So it's more of a materials science question. Can we figure out formulas for materials to last longer? And from an operational perspective, aside from the introduction of advanced manufacturing practices that maybe pose some cybersecurity or information protection barriers, do we know enough about emerging business models? At our lunch table today, we were talking about capital equipment and different financing for that capital equipment that is designed to be more helpful to refurbish down the road. For certain production facilities, we wouldn't want to have refurbished capital equipment, but we might want to be able to unload that capital equipment to be refurbished. So it's a barrier is how do we adequately monitor all the available business models at our disposal within our supply chain.
Great. And we have about 2 minutes left. So for the final question that came in is a question about communications and how you effectively communicate about the circular economy efforts and opportunities to the residents and customers that are not engaged in the space.
You want me to start? Okay. So what we do is we're in neighborhoods, we're at community events. You know, we've got information on social media. We do walk and talks with our residents. And for us, really, it's about making that connection, right? And why is this important? So everyone gets recycling, right? So we start there, and then we talk about the circular economy. But we don't use the word circular economy, you know. We start off about, you know, not sending waste to the landfill, and also about how it's good for the environment, right? How it's actually creating economic value, economic activity for the city, and then it's good for people. So whatever we do from a circular economy standpoint, it's actually helping us to keep our rates low. Our residents, right? Your consumers, your stakeholders, they like that. They like that. And so I think that's something that resonates with them. But again, we just got to continue to get the message out and keep it simple. That would be my thing.
I think it's, you know, certainly it helps when cities like Phoenix are communicating that to their citizens. It's also trying to kind of break down the concepts to something that is relatable to customers or residents, and helping them understand the environmental impact, let's say, of not recycling or reusing or repurposing materials. And ultimately, goes back earlier to some of the challenges related to implementation, but helping folks understand the actual way to implement it, because it's not as easy, like I said earlier, as turning off a light switch. How do you do it? The 10 items, you know, maybe it's something as simple as that, but ultimately it's making it relatable and giving people a very manageable and actionable task related to it.
I think responsible businesses historically was a nice to have. I think it's an expectation of doing business now. Customers expect companies to be responsible. The circular economy is a component of that. A lot of companies represented in this room are doing great things within their development, their operations, and their communities locally giving back. I think it's important to tell that story to your customers, especially those things that they are demanding, of how you're delivering on what they expect. So I think circular economy is just a component ultimately of responsible business, and it's become table stakes to do business and becoming more so.
I'm sort of simple-minded, but I'd like to bet that there's 435 people down the road in a domed building that would probably resonate with job creation and economic growth. So I guess we started where we ended where we started, to complete the circle, so to speak. I'd like to thank our panel for their candor and their advice, and hopefully we help advance the discussion from aspiration to implementation.
Okay, great. So thank you to Matt and Ginger, Michael and David for that very insightful discussion. So we are at the end of day one, and I want to thank you all for a fantastic first day. We're going to shortly move into our networking reception, but before we do, just want to say that we're just getting warmed up. And I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the app for tomorrow, because we have a lot more fantastic content lined up for you. For example, we'll be talking about circular economy standards and metrics. How do we measure progress? How do we communicate progress? So we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about how do we finance the circular economy. So that will be a very interesting discussion. Michael mentioned the need for cross-sector collaboration. We will have a session on our Beyond 34 pilot project, where we're teaming up with RRS, the Walmart Foundation, Target, Walgreens, Republic Services, and Dow Chemical Company to bring closed-loop solutions to cities. So I encourage you to join us tomorrow for that discussion. We'll also be looking at how do we close the loop on water, and looking at tools like the Water Risk Monetizer. And we'll also be looking at how do we communicate the circular economy. So there's a question that came out of the last panel. How do we develop a compelling circular economy communication strategy? What are the key elements there? How do we roll that out? What are those best practices? So that will also be a great discussion. We also heard some questions about disruptive enabling technologies for a circular economy. And we'll be closing out tomorrow with our second round of innovation blitzes, looking at really innovative, disruptive technologies that are really revolutionizing the circular economy field. So take a look at tomorrow's program, start deciding where it is that you want to go, and look forward to seeing you in the morning. So again, we're moving into our networking reception. For those of you that signed up for a dinner, you should have gotten an email with the location and details around that. If you didn't, please see us at registration. We'll get you taken care of. And with that, I want to again thank you, and the program will commence tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. with our networking breakfast. So with that, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.